The air beneath the trees tasted stale, thick with the damp musk of rotting leaves, and something older, something that didn't breathe, but watched. Harry stepped over a gnarled root, his wand lit with a low blue glow that barely pierced the gloom. To his left, Aurora Finch moved in tight silence, her hand never far from her wand. Behind them, the third member of the team, young Reed, kept checking his compass, its needle spinning like a lost thought. "They say 3 gamekeepers vanished last month," Reed muttered. "Not a trace, not even blood." "Then why are we walking into the same forest they disappeared in?" Finch asked, voice low, but edge. "Because no one else will," Harry said, not turning, "and because the Ministry can't pretend it's just wolves anymore." The rumors had begun quietly, whispers in Hogsmeade taverns, notes passed between groundskeepers. A single owl found with its feathers turned to bark. Then came the disappearances. A healer collecting moonshade, a young wizard chasing a runaway thestral, now the gamekeepers. All last seen near the edge of the forbidden forest. All gone without a sound. Harry's scar hadn't burned in years, but since arriving at the edge of the forest that morning, a dull pressure had settled behind his left eye, faint but insistent, like a memory trying to surface. The trees grew thicker, their trunks warped and twisted, bark etched with patterns that looked almost deliberate, circles within spirals, runes worn smooth by time. The light dimmed further, though it was only midday. The canopy above wasn't just leaves, it was interwoven with something glistening, like cobwebs spun from silver thread. "Wait," Finch said sharply, holding up a hand. They froze. A sound drifted through the underbrush, not animal, not wind. A whisper. No, many whispers, layered over one another, speaking in a language that curled around the edges of understanding. Words like roots, slow and deep. They broke the oaths. The stone remembers. The blood will answer. Star Harry turned slowly, scanning the shadows. "Did you hear?" "Hear. I felt star it," Reed said, voice tight. "Like spiders under my skin." Finch raised her wand, the tip trembling slightly. "We should turn back. This isn't an investigation. It's a trap." Harry took another step forward. The pressure behind his eyes sharpened. "We came to find answers. And if the answers don't want to be found..." She shot back. The whispers grew louder, coiling around the trees, the air thickening with the scent of petrichor and iron. Then silence, sudden, complete. A single crow landed on a low branch, its eyes glowing faintly green. It tilted its head, watching them. Then it spoke, not in a caw, but in a child's voice. "Only 2 will walk out." Reed stumbled back. Finch raised her wand. But before she could cast, the ground beneath them trembled. Vines erupted from the soil, quick as striking serpents, wrapping around Finch's ankle and yanking her off her feet. She screamed once before vanishing into the brush. "Finch!" Harry lunged, but another vine lashed out, knocking his wand from his hand. Reed tried to disapparate. Nothing happened. The forest held them like a fist. The crow flapped once, landing on Harry's shoulder. Its voice was soft now, almost kind. "You are the scarred one, the last speaker." Harry didn't answer. He stared into the trees where Finch had disappeared, but the forest offered no trace. No sound, no blood, only silence, and the slow, rising certainty that they were no longer the hunters. They were the accused. The air beneath the canopy was thick, not just with summer humidity but with something older, something watchful. Harry's wand trembled slightly in his grip, its tip glowing with a faint blue shimmer that pulsed like a nervous heartbeat. To his left, Ron muttered under his breath, scanning the underbrush with wide eyes, while Hermione moved ahead with quiet purpose, her fingers brushing the bark of an ancient oak as if reading its thoughts. "This isn't right," she whispered. "The wards, they're not just broken, they're rearranged." Harry stepped forward, his boots sinking slightly into moss-covered earth that hadn't been there an hour ago. The path behind them, the clear, trodden trail they'd followed from Hagrid's hut, was gone. In its place stood a wall of ivy-choked stone, moss dripping like melting wax from crumbling arches that led nowhere. He turned sharply. No sign of the way they'd come. No footprints. Nothing. "Did anyone else see that?" Ron asked, voice tight. "No," Harry said. "But I felt it, like the forest blinked." Hermione pressed her palm flat against the stone. This ruin wasn't here before. It's not on any map. Not even in Star Hogwarts. A history star. It's magic, Neville said quietly, stepping forward. He crouched, examining a cluster of pale blue mushrooms sprouting from a rotting log. But not wizard magic. This is older. Look at the way the stems spiral, counterclockwise. That's fey growth. They only bloom when the veil thins. A cold ripple passed through the group. Even Ron, who still struggled with the idea that magical creatures had laws of their own, swallowed hard. Harry exhaled slowly. So the forest is changing, rewriting itself. It's testing us, a voice said from the shadows. They spun. Daphne Greengrass stepped into the dim green light, her silver-trimmed robes untouched by the damp, her expression unreadable. She carried no wand, just a long bone-white staff, carved with spiraling runes that seemed to drink the light. "What are you doing here?" Harry demanded, raising his wand. Daphne didn't flinch. "Same as you, following the disturbances. Only I didn't need a map. The forest lets me pass." "That's convenient," Ron sneered. She turned her pale eyes on him. "And you prefer I let you wander until you vanish. The last wizard who got lost here was found 20 years later, alive, but he spoke only in riddles and believed he was a badger." Hermione stepped between them. "If the forest is altering, then we're already in one of the trials. The wild court doesn't summon without warning." Daphne nodded. "The disappearing path. The first trial. You don't find your way out. You earn it." Harry studied her. He didn't trust her. No one from Slytherin raised in that world of whispers and silent alliances could be trusted easily, but there was no guile in her voice. Only certainty. "How?" he asked. "You answer the forest," she said, touching her staff to the ground. A ripple spread through the moss, and for a heartbeat the air shimmered with images. Twisted trees, a moonlit glade, a hollow crown with antlers. "It asks in ways you won't understand. You answer with truth, not force." "That's it," Ron said. "We just talk to a tree." "No," Daphne said. "You listen. Most fail because they try to fight. The forest doesn't want defiance. It wants recognition." Hermione's eyes lit with understanding. "It wants us to acknowledge it. As alive, as sovereign." Daphne inclined her head. A low groan echoed through the trees, wood shifting, roots stirring beneath the soil. The ruin behind them trembled, stones grinding as the archway widened, revealing a tunnel choked with vines. "That's our way," Daphne said. "But it closes at the first lie, the first spell cast in anger, the first denial of what this place is." Harry looked at his friends, then at the tunnel. "You don't have to follow me," he said. Hermione stepped forward. "Yes, we do," Ron sighed. "Can't let you have all the fun, can I?" Daphne watched him, and for the first time the ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Then walk carefully," she said, "and speak only what you mean." The forest floor was a tapestry of damp moss and rotting leaves, each step sinking slightly beneath Daphne's boots as she moved like a shadow through the thick undergrowth. The air hung heavy with the scent of wet bark and something older, something that hummed beneath the skin of the earth. She had been tracking Astoria for 3 days now, following the faint fading traces only a blood relative could sense. A snapped twig at an unnatural angle, a whisper of lavender oil on a torn strip of cloth, the ghost of a spell that tasted like frost on the back of her tongue. She paused, crouching low, fingertips brushing the base of a gnarled yew. There, barely visible beneath a veil of ivy, was a mark, a sigil carved in ash and bone, glowing faintly blue. The wild court's signature. Her breath caught. They had her sister, or she'd gone to them willingly. Either thought made Daphne's chest tighten. A twig snapped to her left. She turned, wand already in hand, heart hammering against her ribs. The trees parted, and through the mist stepped Harry Potter, wand raised, eyes narrowed. Behind him, Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger fanned out, wands drawn, faces wary. Hermione's gaze flicked to the sigil, then to Daphne. "You shouldn't be here," Harry said, voice low. Daphne didn't lower her wand. "Neither should you." "We're on a mission," Ron said, stepping forward. "From the Ministry." "No," Hermione cut in, eyes still on the sigil. "They wouldn't send anyone here. Not for this. You're not Ministry." Daphne smirked, cold and sharp. "And you're not exactly following protocol either, are you, Granger?" breaking into ancient magical territories without clearance. How very Gryffindor. Harry stepped forward, ignoring the jab. We're looking for someone too. A girl, blonde, about 15. She was taken. Daphne's breath hitched. You've seen her? Not her, Hermione said gently. But we found traces, like yours. Same magic. Same direction. She pointed deeper into the woods where the trees grew so close. Their branches twisted into a canopy that swallowed the sky. The testing us. The trials begin there. Daphne studied them. The mud on their robes, the dark circles under their eyes, the way Harry's hand trembled slightly around his wand. They were exhausted, but alive, and they had followed the same path she had. I don't work with Gryffindors, she said, but her voice lacked its usual edge. You don't have to, Harry said, but if we're all going the same way, it makes sense to go together. 2 sets of eyes see more than one. And if you're lying, she asked. Ron scoffed. You're the one lurking in the dark, like a Death Eater. Hermione shot him a look. Ron. Daphne ignored him. I don't trust you. I don't trust you either, Harry said. But I know what it's like to lose someone. I know what it's like to chase them into places no one should go. For the first time, something in her cracked. She looked down at her hand, still clutching the small silver locket, Astoria's locket, that she'd found near a stream 2 nights ago. She's my sister, she whispered, and I'm not losing her. Silence settled between them, broken only by the distant call of a nightjar, one that didn't sound quite like a bird. Then Hermione stepped forward, slowly, and held out a hand. We'll watch your back, if you watch ours. Daphne hesitated. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Finally, she nodded. One wrong move, and I'll hex you into next week. Harry almost smiled. Wouldn't expect anything less. They moved on together, 6 feet of wary silence between them, the trees closing in behind like dates shutting in a tomb. And deep beneath the roots, something ancient stirred, listening, waiting, breathing. The forest floor gave way beneath their feet like rotten parchment, and one moment Harry was reaching for his wand. The next he was falling into darkness so complete it felt like drowning. Daphne's cry cut short as the earth snapped shut above them, sealing them in silence. The air turned thick and cool, scented with moss, and something older, petrichor, and iron, the breath of buried stone. Harry hit the ground hard, rolling onto his side, pain flaring in his shoulder. He pushed himself up, fingers scraping against damp earth and gnarled roots that pulsed faintly, like veins beneath skin. Greengrass? His voice echoed strangely, muffled yet stretched, as if the darkness itself absorbed sound unevenly. Here, she said, her voice tight. Don't move. Something's watching. He froze. The roots around them trembled, retracting slowly, pulling back into the walls of a narrow tunnel that hadn't been there a moment ago. Moonlight, pale and ghostly, seeped through cracks in the ceiling. No, not moonlight. It shimmered with an inner glow, like water licked from below. The tunnel widened, revealing smooth stone steps carved with symbols that shifted when he looked directly at them. Wards, old ones. Older than Hogwarts, maybe older than time as wizards knew it. Daphne stood a few paces away, her blonde hair catching the faint light like spun silver. She held her wand low, eyes scanning the dark arches ahead. We shouldn't be here, she whispered. This magic, it doesn't obey the ministry, it doesn't even acknowledge it. Harry exhaled. Since when did you care about ministry rules? Since they stopped meaning anything, she snapped. That was no ordinary sinkhole. That was an invitation, or a summons, and I don't think we had a choice. He wanted to argue, but the truth settled, like stone in his gut. They'd been walking through the edge of the forbidden forest, chasing rumors of a vanished centaur patrol, when the ground opened. No spell, no incantation, just ancient earth obeying a will they couldn't see. Now the air hummed with a low thrum, like a heartbeat beneath the soil. They descended in silence, the steps spiraling down, deeper than any cellar, deeper than the Chamber of Secrets. The walls changed, no longer stone, but living root, woven together like the ribs of some colossal beast. Bioluminescent fungi clung to the curves, pulsing in slow rhythm. Harry touched one, and it flared bright blue, sending ripples through the network above. A whisper followed, not in any language he knew, but in feeling, curiosity, caution, memory. Don't provoke it, Daphne murmured. This place remembers every footstep, every lie. He pulled his hand back. You know something? She hesitated. My grandmother spoke of the wild court. Not in the histories. Those are lies written by wizards who fear what they can't control. But in the old books, the ones locked behind blood wards, she said they were the first judges of magic, older than wands, older than words. They made pacts with the first wizards, oaths to protect the wild places, to let magic breathe freely. And when those oaths were broken, she didn't finish. The court took action, Harry said quietly. The court star judges star. She corrected. And they don't care about your fame, Potter, or your parents, or your war. A soft chime rang through the tunnel, clear as a bell. The roots ahead parted, unfolding like petals, revealing a vast cavern beyond. A river of liquid starlight cut through the center, flowing uphill. Trees with bark like silver flames stood in silent rows, their leaves chiming in a wind that wasn't there. And at the heart of it all, a circle of thrones, twisted roots, antlers, stone and bone, each occupied by figures that were almost human, almost not. One turned its head, eyes like polished obsidian, and spoke without moving its mouth. Harry James Potter, Daphne Cecilia Greengrass, you stand beneath the roots, where the world forgets its name. The pacts are broken, the balance undone. You are not here to plead, you are here to prove star. Gould swallowed. Harry swallowed. Prove what? That wizards still remember how to be true star. Daphne's hand brushed his arm. Brief, urgent. Don't promise anything, she whispered. They don't want answers, they want sacrifices. Gold stone pressed against Harry's cheek, as consciousness returned in sharp, jagged pieces. His head throbbed with a rhythm that matched the distant drip of water, each beat echoing through the cavernous dark. He groaned, pushing himself up on trembling arms, his fingers brushing something slick and moss-covered. The air tasted ancient, damp earth, petrichor, and something else, something wild and electric, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. Beside him Daphne stirred, her breath shallow and quick. She sat up slowly, her pale hands clutching at the folds of her robes as if they might anchor her to reality. Her silver blonde hair was tangled, a few leaves caught near her temple. Her eyes, wide and wary, scanned the space around them. "Where are we?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Harry didn't answer. He couldn't. The chamber they were in defied reason. Towering pillars of black basalt rose into shadow, carved with spiraling ruins that pulsed faintly with blue-green light. The ceiling was lost in darkness, but faint glimmers, like stars, drifted lazily in the void above, casting shifting patterns on the stone floor. The ground sloped gently downward toward a raised dais, where 7 thrones stood in a half-circle, each occupied, and not by humans. To the left sat a creature with antlers like a stag's, but skin the color of birch bark, eyes glowing amber beneath a crown of ivy and thorn. To the right lounged something serpentine, coiled upon its seat, scales shimmering between emerald and shadow, a face both beautiful and utterly alien. Between them were others, beings of bark and root, of fire and feather, of mist given form, each radiating a power that made Harry's scar hum, not with pain but with recognition, as if something deep within him remembered them. "This is not the Forbidden Forest," Daphne said, her voice tighter now. "This is older." A gong sounded. No, not a gong, a chime, like crystal struck with wind. The sound rolled through the chamber, and every creature turned toward them, silent, expectant. Then the one in the central throne rose. She was tall, impossibly so, draped in a gown of living vines threaded with moonlight. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, and her eyes, pale, pupilless, ancient, fixed on Harry and Daphne with unbearable weight. "You stand before the wild court," she said, her voice echoing not from her mouth, but from the walls, the stones, the air itself. "You are accused," Harry swallowed. "Accused of what?" "Of forgetting," she replied, "of breaking the oaths carved in root and sky. Your kind once knelt beneath the old trees and swore to protect the balance. You promised not to bind the wild magic, not to cage the spirits of brooks and wind, but you built your towers, you forged your wands. You named yourselves masters. Daphne stood, brushing dirt from her robes with deliberate calm. "We didn't make those promises. We weren't even born then." The antlered judge leaned forward. "The blood remembers, the magic remembers, and the debt remains." A third figure, small and cloaked in bark, stepped forward, holding a bowl filled with dark water. "They must face the trials. Only through the proving can innocence be measured." "The first trial begins at dawn," said the central figure. "The labyrinth of whispers. Fail, and you will not return. Succeed, and you may yet earn the right to speak." Harry turned to Daphne. "We're supposed to trust them?" She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "We don't have a choice, but I suggest we don't tell them what we're really thinking." A low ripple of sound passed through the chamber. Laughter, perhaps, or wind through leaves. "You already fail to understand," murmured the serpent-throned judge. "Here, thoughts are not hidden. Secrets bloom like fungi in the dark." Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the stone. He could feel them, pressing at the edges of his mind, not invading, but waiting, listening. And beneath it all, deeper than the roots of the earth, something stirred. A pulse, slow and vast, like the heartbeat of the world itself. Sleeping, not dead, not yet. The air beneath the canopy was thick with the scent of moss and damp earth, laced with something older, ozone and petrichor, like the breath of a storm that had never broken. Harry's wrists still ached from the enchanted vines that had bound them, their grip unyielding as serpents, dragging him and Daphne through the tangled undergrowth. Now they stood in a clearing where the trees arched inward, their trunks carved with runes that pulsed faintly, like slow, sleeping hearts. Before them, the wild court sat upon thrones of root and antler. The eldest among them, a being with bark-like skin and eyes like polished amber, rose. His voice was not spoken, but felt, a vibration in the bones. "Harry Potter, Daphne Greengrass, you trespass where mortals were never meant to walk." Daphne straightened, her back rigid, though Harry saw the tremor in her fingers. "We didn't come by choice," she said, voice cool, measured. "Your vines took us." A ripple passed through the assembly. Some hissed, others murmured in a language that sounded like wind through reeds. The amber-eyed figure raised a hand and silence fell. The accords were broken. Words ignored. Blood spilled on hallowed ground. The forest remembers. The court judges. Harry swallowed. "We didn't do any of that. We didn't even know this place existed." "You are of the world above," the figure intoned, "and the world above has forgotten its oaths. The balance is fraying, magic bleeds, stars flicker where they should not." He raised a hand, and the earth between Harry and Daphne split open. From the fissure rose a column of light, a shifting image of Hogwarts. Its towers cracked, the sky above it darkened by a swirling void. Students collapsed mid-step, their wands turning to ash. Diagon Alley crumbled, spellfire guttering out like dying candles. Harry's breath caught. "This is what comes," the elder said, "if no restitution is made. If no one proves that wizard kind still honors the old ways." Daphne's gaze narrowed. "And you think we're going to fix it?" "You will face the trials of the verdant oath," came the reply. 3 tasks, drawn from the time before stone, before wands, before words. Complete them, and the balance may be restored. Fail, and the veil between worlds will tear. Your kind will lose magic entirely, and you will not leave this wood. Harry turned to her. "You've got to be joking." Daphne didn't look at him. Her eyes remained fixed on the elder. "And if we refuse, then the sentence is immediate. Death, and the unraveling begins sooner." A beat passed. Somewhere deep in the forest, a horn sounded, low, mournful, like the call of some ancient beast, stirring in its sleep. Harry exhaled. "So we don't have a choice." "No," the elder said. "But you have a chance." From the moss at their feet, 3 roots emerged, coiling into shapes. First, a chalice filled with black water that reflected no light. Second, a broken crown, its gold tarnished, set with stones that wept silver. Third, a door, small, iron-bound, half buried in the earth, with no handle. "These are the trials," the elder said. "The cup of truths unspoken, the crown of buried sorrow, the door that demembers. Each will test not your magic, but your soul. One by one, you will face them. Together." Daphne finally looked at Harry. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice, when she spoke, was quiet. "You lied to everyone once. About the Department of Mysteries." Harry stiffened. "So did you, about your family's ties to the Death Eaters." She didn't deny it, just nodded once. "Then maybe we're the right ones for the first trial." The cup trembled in the vision, its dark surface rippling. Harry felt a pull in his chest, as if something buried deep was stirring, eager to surface. The elder stepped back. "Begin at dawn, and know this: deceit will kill you faster than failure. The forest sees all, even the lies you tell yourselves." The rope around Harry's wrist was not rope at all. It pulsed, warm and faintly green, like ivy threaded with starlight. It coiled from his arm to Daphne Greengrass's, where it curled just above her pale skin like a sleeping serpent. Every step he took she matched, unwillingly close. They stood beneath the great hollow where the wild court had passed sentence, the air still humming with ancient magic. The Fey Lords had vanished into the mist, leaving only the echo of their verdict. 3 trials, 3 chances, or the forest would rise. And this binding, this cursed tether, would not break until one of them died, or the final trial was complete. Daphne tugged sharply, testing the link. "It flexes," she muttered, more to herself than to him. "But it doesn't stretch. 10 feet maybe, and then it pulls you back," Harry finished, rubbing his wrist. He already tried sprinting toward the edge of the clearing. The vine had snapped taut like a shock charm to the bones. "They weren't joking about staying close." "No," she said coolly. "They were very serious, which means we're stuck. You, hero of the wizarding world, and me, pure-blood disappointment, chained like fools in the dark." Harry turned to her, jaw tight. "You don't have to make it worse. I'm not making anything worse. I'm stating facts." Her eyes flicked to the forest ahead, where the trees grew twisted and close, their bark scarred with symbols that seemed to shift when not directly observed. "We need to move. That thing in the roots, the one that watched us while the court spoke, is still down there." I felt it breathe. He looked. The earth had settled, but the scent of damp soil, and something older, moss over stone, forgotten altars, hung low, and beneath it, a whisper, like roots sliding through bone. They started walking. The forest swallowed sound. No birds, no wind, just the soft give of moss underfoot, and the occasional creak of a branch that moved when nothing had touched it. Harry kept his wand out, the tip glowing faintly. Daphne walked with her shoulders back, as if daring the shadows to challenge her. But her hand trembled, just once, when a cluster of silver moths erupted from a hollow log, swirling around them like a brief storm. "Don't stop," she said without looking at him. "I wasn't. You were staring at the moths. They looked wrong. They're made of memory," she said. "They show you what the forest remembers, not what happened." Harry frowned. "I saw a boy, in robes, running." Daphne went very still. "I saw the same one, only he wasn't running. He was being pulled." A silence settled, heavier than before. After a while, she spoke again. "You don't trust me. You're a Slytherin," he said, then immediately regretted it. "And you're the chosen one," she shot back, "which makes you either a legend or a target. Either way, not someone I'd pick for a walk in a cursed wood." He almost laughed. "Glad we're on the same page." They'd passed a ring of mushrooms glowing blue at the edges. The vine between them tightened slightly, as if resisting. "Don't step in the circle," Daphne said. "Why not?" "Because I've read about this. That's a Fey threshold. Step in, and you don't step out. Not for 100 years, not in your time." Harry stared. "You've read about this." "I read a lot," she said simply. "Most people assume I'm just waiting to marry well and vanish into some manor. But I've studied old magic, forgotten treaties, the things wizards pretend never existed." He looked at her then, not as an enemy, not as a rival, but as someone who had spent her life being underestimated. The vine pulsed, warm between them, and deep beneath the trees, something old turned over in its sleep. The air shimmered like heat haze over stone, and then the world folded in on itself. One moment Harry stood in the cold, moss-carved chamber of the wild court, the towering Fey Lords watching with eyes like frozen stars. The next he was falling. No, not falling. Star unspooling star, his body dissolving into mist and memory before snapping back together, beneath a canopy of silver leaves that pulsed with a slow internal light. He landed hard on softed moss-covered earth, breath knocked from his lungs. Beside him, Daphne gasped. The forest around them was not like any part of the forbidden forest Harry had ever known. Trees with bark like polished bone rose in spirals, their branches twisting upward as if fleeing the ground. The air smelled of damp violets and something metallic, like old blood or rusted iron. A low hum vibrated through the soles of his boots. "Where are we?" Daphne whispered, her voice tight. "Not where," Harry said, scanning the shifting shadows. "When, or what?" A whisper brushed against his ear. "Star, Mum. Star." And he spun, wand out. Nothing. Just the rustle of leaves that didn't move in any wind. Daphne stepped back, her pale fingers gripping her wand. "They said the trials test truth, that they'll show us what we hide from ourselves, and punish us for it," Harry muttered. He remembered the High Warden's words, spoken in a voice like cracking ice. "Star, you will face not what you fear most, but what you refuse to see." Star, a flicker in the corner of his vision. A child's laughter. Ginny's voice, bright and warm, echoing from between two trees. He took a step toward it, heart clenching, then stopped. "No," he breathed. "That's not real." But the laughter came again, closer now, followed by a cry. Familiar, desperate. "Star, Harry, help me. Star." It was Cho. It was serious. It was Cedric, lying in the graveyard, life draining from his eyes. Daphne grabbed his arm. "Don't look. Don't listen." Her touch was cold, but solid. "Real." "How do you know what's real?" he asked, teeth clenched. "Because I've spent years learning to lie to everyone," she said, voice low, "including myself. And the first rule is, always watch the ground." He looked down. The moss beneath their feet shifted in patterns. Circles within circles, spirals that seemed to pull at the edges of vision. Where their footprints landed, the moss darkened, as if absorbing something. "Memories," Daphne said. "It's feeding on them." A shape formed between the trees, a tall figure in tattered robes, wand raised. Harry's breath caught, serious. The figure turned, hollow eyes, a smile too wide. "You left me," it said, voice layered. "Serious, but also Peter Pettigrew, and Bellatrix, and Voldemort. You always leave them." Harry staggered back. "No, that's not." "Look at her," the thing hissed, tilting its head toward Daphne. "She knows. She's watched people die. She didn't care. And you, Star, you Star pretend to care, but you'd trade 10 lives to save one." "You know you would." Daphne stepped in front of him, wand steady. "It's not him." The figure lunged. She slashed her wand sideways. A sharp, clean motion. A ribbon of silver light cut through the air, tearing the illusion apart like paper. It dissolved into crows that scattered into the canopy, their cries like breaking glass. Silence fell. Harry exhaled, trembling. Daphne didn't look at him. "Second rule, don't let it speak. The longer it talks, the deeper it gets." He nodded, throat tight. Around them, the forest seemed to breathe. Roots shifted beneath the moss. The silver leaves dimmed, then brightened in waves. "We can't stay here," he said. "No," she agreed. "But wherever we go, it'll follow. It's not outside us. It's star and star us." He looked at her then, really looked. Her face was pale, jaw clenched, but her eyes, cold, calculating Daphne Greengrass, held a flicker of something raw. Fear, not of the forest, of being seen. "Then we don't run," Harry said. "We walk, together. And we don't answer the voices." She met his gaze. For a moment, something passed between them. Acknowledgement, perhaps, or the first thread of trust. "Fine," she said. "But if you start crying over your dead godfather, I'm leaving you behind." A weak smile tugged at his lips. "Wouldn't dream of it, Greengrass." They stepped forward. The forest shifted. The trial had only just begun. The air in the glade tasted of damp earth and old iron, thick with the scent of moss-choked stone, and something sharper, memory. Harry stood barefoot on the cold flagstones, the trial circle, drawn in luminescent lichen, pulsing beneath his soles, like a slow, sleeping heart. Around him, the trees leaned inward, their bark split with glowing runes that flickered like dying embers. The second trial had begun without warning, and now the forest exhaled ghosts. A whisper first, Lupin's voice, low and warm, reciting a charm Harry hadn't heard since 5th year. He turned, wand half raised, but there was no one. Then, footsteps in dead leaves. Tonks, grinning, her hair shifting from bubblegum pink to storm-cloud gray, as she saluted him with 2 fingers. He swallowed hard. "You're not real," he said, voice rough. "No," she agreed, still smiling, "but you are, and that's worse, isn't it?" The glade shifted. The trees pulled back, replaced by the shattered corridors of the Department of Mysteries. The veil stood at the center now, fluttering like a breath caught between worlds. Sirius stepped through, not as a shade, but as he'd been the last time Harry saw him. Alive, defiant, laughing. "Always knew you'd find a way to bring the whole world down with you, Harry," he said, eyes bright, with that reckless light Harry had missed for years. "You died because of me," Harry whispered. "Nah," Sirius said, shaking his head. "I died because I chose to. That's the difference you've never learned." The ground trembled. The ruins melted, and suddenly he was on the battlefield at Hogwarts. Smoke, screams, the stench of burning spellwork. He saw Fred's body carried away, saw Lupin and Tonks pale and still beneath the shroud, saw Neville rise with the sword in the great hall. But then the voices changed. Not the dead whispers of the living, murmuring in the dark. "Star, he's the chosen one. He'll save us. He's broken. He's not enough." Star Daphne watched from the edge of the circle, her own trial delayed. She knew better than to interfere. The Wild Court's magic didn't punish failure with death, it punished it with truth, and Harry was drowning in his, but her turn came soon enough. The lichen flared white, and the glade transformed again, this time into a manner she hadn't seen in years. Greengrass Hall, pristine and severe, its gardens lined with silver-veined hedges that whispered in Parseltongue when the wind blew. The younger Daphne, no more than 10, stood at the edge of the fountain, her mother's voice echoing from the terrace. "Blood purity isn't tradition, Daphne. It's arithmetic, and ours is the only sum that matters." She clenched her jaw. "I was a child. The vision didn't care." Her father appeared, tall and cold, his wand tracing a sigil in the air. A house elf collapsed, twitching, as the mark in the sky blazed above their estate. "Loyalty is proven in silence," he said. "And ours was never in question." "I didn't raise my wand," Daphne said, stepping forward. "I didn't take the mark." "But you didn't run," the vision of her mother replied, turning slowly. "You stayed, you smiled at Death Eaters. You learned their songs, their codes, their quiet cruelties." "I survived," Daphne hissed. "At what cost?" the house whispered, walls bleeding black-eyed. "You still carry their pride. You still flinch when a half-blood speaks too loud in the corridors. You still measure worth in surnames." She looked down. Her hands, clean, unmarked, shook. Harry staggered out of his trial first, breathe ragged, eyes hollow. He saw her standing there, pale as moonlight, and for a moment they were just 2 survivors in a world that demanded too much. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't need to. The silence between them was heavy with things unsaid. Regret, shame, the fragile understanding that neither of them had clean hands. When the lichen dimmed, the path ahead split into 2. One led deeper into the forest, where the trees grew teeth, and the wind spoke in riddles. The other vanished into mist, toward a crumbling archway, carved with the sigil of an ancient oath, one Daphne recognized from her family's hidden grimoires. And beneath it all, something older than the court stirred in the dark, breathing slow, waiting. The air tasted of burnt copper and damp earth, thick with the residue of broken enchantments. Harry's ribs ached where the spectral hound had slammed into him, a phantom pain that lingered long after the creature dissolved into mist. Beside him, Daphne knelt, her breath shallow, fingers pressed to her temple. A thin trail of blood snaked from her nose. "You're hurt," Harry said, reaching for her. She flinched away. "Don't. It's not real." None of it was real. He wanted to argue, wanted to say that the pain, the fear, the way her hand had gripped his when the forest turned against them, felt real enough. But he swallowed the words. The 3rd trial had been an illusion, they'd been told, but one woven from their deepest fears, and the Wild Court had watched, silent and unmoving, from their thrones of root and stone. The 1st trial had tested strength, the climb up the singing cliffs, where every handhold whispered doubts in Harry's ear. The second, cunning, navigating the labyrinth of echoes, where Daphne's sharp mind had saved them from walking in circles for eternity. But this had been different. Personal. "I saw you die," Daphne said, voice low, eyes fixed on the cracked earth. "Over and over, you stepped in front of a curse meant for me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, just watched you fall." Harry's throat tightened. "I saw you walk away. After everything, you just left. Said I wasn't worth the trouble." A bitter laugh escaped her. Typical. "I get the hero's sacrifice. You get the cold-hearted Slytherin." He looked at her then, not the polished mask she wore at Hogwarts, but the girl beneath, pale and trembling, her usual composure cracked open. He remembered her hand in his as the forest twisted around them, the way she'd whispered, "Star, don't let go, Star," when the shadows began to speak. "We made it," he said. "Because we trusted each other," she corrected. "Even when the illusions told us not to." There was a long silence. Somewhere in the distance a single note hung in the air, a horn, maybe, or a bird's call that didn't belong to any creature Harry knew. The trees around them still shimmered faintly, their bark etched with fading runes. Then the ground trembled. The wild court emerged from the mist, not walking, but rising, as if grown from the earth itself. The Erlking, tall and antlered, stepped forward, his eyes like chips of amber. The others followed, dryads with bark-like skin, a river spirit trailing droplets that never touched the ground, a fawn whose hooves left frost in their wake. No one spoke. The silence stretched, brittle, and sharp. Then the Erlking inclined his head. "Few have passed the third trial. Fewer still have done so without turning on one another." Daphne wiped the blood from her nose. "We're not friends. We just survived." "That is the point," murmured the river spirit, her voice like water over stone. "The trials do not ask for friendship. They ask for truth. And you, both of you, chose trust when deception would have been easier." Harry glanced at Daphne. She wouldn't meet his eyes, but her shoulder brushed his as she stood. "The court is surprised," the Erlking admitted. "You carry the weight of your world's mistakes, yet you do not repeat them." A pause, then softer. "Perhaps there is hope." Hope. The words settled over Harry like sunlight after days beneath storm clouds. But even as he felt it, warm, fragile, he noticed something else. Beyond the court, where the trees thinned into darkness, the shadows didn't move with the wind. They pulsed, like a heartbeat. And deep below, in the roots of the earth, something groaned. The air in the glade tasted of moss and moonlight, cool and silver on the tongue. Harry sat with his back against the smooth trunk of an ancient yew, its bark etched with runes that pulsed faintly, like a slow, sleeping heartbeat. Around them, the trees arched inward, forming a canopy so thick it turned midday into twilight. Fireflies, or perhaps they were will-o'-wisps, drifted in lazy spirals, their glow shifting between gold and gold. Daphne lay on a bed of soft, luminescent ferns, one arm flung over her eyes, her breathing even. They had earned this rest, barely. The second trial had left Harry's ribs aching and Daphne's hands trembling with spent magic. The wild court had granted them this sanctuary, a place beyond time, where the air itself wove truth like thread into every word. "You're staring," Daphne said without moving. "I wasn't. You were." She lowered her arm, fixing him with a cool, knowing gaze. "And don't bother lying. This place won't let you." Harry exhaled, shifting against the tree. A sharp twinge shot through his side. "Then what would you like me to say? That I'm wondering why a girl raised to believe in bloodlines and ancient names just risked her life, pulling me out of that sinkhole?" Daphne sat up slowly, tucking a strand of pale hair behind her ear. Her robes were torn at the hem, smudged with earth, and something that shivered faintly, like crushed starlight. "I didn't do it for you, Potter. I did it because if you die, I fail, and I don't fail." "Right, of course." He looked away, toward the center of the glade, where a small pool reflected not the sky, but shifting scenes. A child in a garden, a woman weeping beneath a willow, a man standing at a crossroads. So what happens if we both survive the trials? Do they let us go? Or is this all just another kind of cage? Daphne didn't answer at once. She reached out, brushing her fingers over a cluster of silver blossoms that opened at her touch, releasing a scent like winter apples. "You think I don't wonder the same? Then I don't lie awake at night, wondering if my family even remembers my name, or if they've already buried me in memory." Harry turned to her, startled. "They would never—" "They would." Her voice was quiet, final. "In my world, disappearance is the same as death. Silence is consent. And sentiment is weakness." She looked at him then, really looked, and something in her eyes flickered. Not anger, not pride, but something raw. "You've never had to earn love, have you? It's just always been there, even when you didn't want it." He flinched. It wasn't that simple. But it was simpler. You had people who fought for you, who believed in you without condition. She paused. "I had tutors, expectations, a name to uphold." The pool rippled. For a moment it showed Harry as a boy, small and wide-eyed, standing in a train compartment, Ron grinning beside him. Then it shifted, Daphne, alone in a vast ballroom, surrounded by masked figures, her mother's hand tightening on her shoulder like a warning. Harry swallowed. "I didn't know." "No, you didn't." She pulled her knees to her chest. "And I didn't care to tell you, but this place, it pulls things out, like thorns." Silence settled between them, softer now. The wind carried the sound of distant chimes, though there were no bells Harry could see. Somewhere beyond the trees, a creature called, low and mournful, like a memory. "I hated you once," Daphne said suddenly. Harry blinked. "What?" "In second year, when you stopped the basilisk, when you became the hero again. I thought you didn't deserve it, that it was all luck, that you didn't understand what it cost to be more than just seen." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'd give it all up. In a heartbeat. The name, the fame, the weight of everyone's hope. I never asked for any of it. I know that now." She met his eyes. "I saw you in the trial, when the shadows took the shape of your godfather. You didn't run. You fought them, even when they whispered that you'd failed him, that it was your fault." Harry looked down. His hands were clenched. "It was my fault." "No." Her voice was firm. "It was Bellatrix. It was Voldemort. It was a dozen things beyond your control. But you carry it like a stone in your chest, don't you?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The glade knew. The air hummed with it. After a long moment, Daphne said, "When this is over, if we survive, I think I'd like to see the sea." Harry frowned. "The sea? I've never seen it. Never been allowed. Too unpredictable. Too wild." She smiled faintly. "Funny, isn't it? A pure-blood heir who's afraid of nothing." "Afraid of waves." He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time saw not the ice, but the fire beneath. "Then we'll go. After. I'll take you." She raised an eyebrow. "You'd take me?" "If you'll let me." The pool shimmered. This time it showed two figures standing on a cliff, wind in their hair, the horizon endless before them. Then the image faded, leaving only still water and the weight of something fragile, something new, blooming, in the silence between them. The fire crackled low between them, casting long, wavering shadows across the moss-strewn floor of the hollow. Outside, the forest breathed, soft, slow, ancient, a rhythm that seemed to seep into Harry's bones. He poked at the flames with a charred stick, watching sparks spiral upward, like tiny dying stars. Daphne sat with her back against a gnarled root, knees drawn up, her cloak wrapped tight around her shoulders. She hadn't spoken since they'd made camp, and the silence had grown from awkward to something heavier, layered with unspoken thoughts. "You don't have to keep pretending you're not exhausted," she said finally, voice quiet, almost lost beneath the rustle of leaves. Harry glanced up. "I'm fine," she exhaled. A small, humorless sound. "You're terrible at lying. You've been limping since we crossed the Silver Fen, and your hands have been shaking since we left the Standing Stones." He looked down at his hands. They were still now. But he remembered how they'd trembled when the stone arch had whispered his name in a voice that wasn't human. "I thought Slytherins were supposed to be good at ignoring the obvious," he muttered. "We are, but I'm also not blind, and I'd rather not have you collapse in the middle of the next trial, because you're too proud to admit you're tired." He studied her. The firelight caught the sharp line of her cheekbone, the guarded glint in her pale eyes. She wasn't smirking, wasn't mocking, just watching. "Neither of us asked for this," he said after a pause. Being dragged into the Wild Court's games. No, she agreed. But here we are. A breeze stirred the canopy above, and a single silver leaf drifted down, landing in the fire where it curled and blackened. I used to think Hogwarts was dangerous, Daphne said, almost to herself. The whispers in the halls, the way people looked at my family, like we were already guilty of something. Like blood was a sentence. Harry frowned. You mean? My father's choices, my name. People assumed I'd follow, that I wanted power the same way they did. She tilted her head, gaze fixed on the flames. But I didn't. I just wanted to be left alone. He didn't answer right away. He thought of the whispers that followed him. Star, the boy who lives, Star. Star, the chosen one, Star. Star, the one who defeated Voldemort, Star. Star, the one has defeated Voldemort, Star. As if he'd chosen any of it. As if surviving pain was something to be celebrated. I know what it's like, he said slowly. To be famous for something you don't remember. To have people expect things from you. Things you're not sure you can give. She turned to him then, really looked at him. Not the legend. Not the symbol. Just him. I never believed the stories, she admitted, about you being arrogant. Or reckless. You struck me as tired, even in first year. Like you were carrying something no one else could see. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. And you, he said. You were always watching. From the edges. I used to think you didn't care about anything. I cared, she said softly. I just learned it was safer not to show it. The fire popped. The night deepened. After a long moment, Harry reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, twisted acorn the Dryad had given him, proof of the first trial completed. It pulsed faintly, like a slow heartbeat. We're going to have to trust each other, he said. Not because we want to, but because if we don't, we won't make it through the next one. Daphne looked at the acorn, then at him. I don't trust easily. I've noticed. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. But I don't think you'd lie to save yourself. Not really. And you? He asked. Would you? She hesitated. Then quietly. I used to think I would. Now, I'm not so sure. The wind stirred again, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant rain. Somewhere deep in the forest, something ancient turned in its sleep. The earth opened beneath their feet without warning. One moment, Harry and Daphne stood at the edge of the whispering hollow, the moss-strewn clearing where the first trial had ended in bloody triumph and uneasy truce. The next, the ground dissolved into shadow. Not a crack, not a tremor. Just a silent, seamless surrender, as if the forest itself exhaled and let them fall. Daphne screamed, one sharp cry, before the dark swallowed her voice. Harry reached for her, fingers brushing cold silk, and then there was only the rush of air, thick with the scent of damp stone and something older. Petrichor and iron, memory and moss. They landed softly, impossibly, on a floor of cracked marble veined with glowing lichen. The impact never came. It was as if the earth had caught them, gently like a mother, cradling startled children. Above, the opening sealed shut, roots weaving across the void like living stitches. Silence pressed in, heavy and watchful. Daphne pushed herself up, breathing hard. Her silver hair, usually so carefully arranged, clung to her temples in tangled strands. She glared at Harry as if this were his fault. Well, Potter, did you plan this too? I didn't exactly send an owl to the roots asking for a trapdoor, he shot back, though his voice lacked heat. His wand was already in hand, lit with a soft star, Lumos star, that painted their faces in pale blue. Shadows stretched long across the ruins, columns broken like snapped bones, archways half swallowed by creeping vines that pulsed faintly, as though breathing. This place, Daphne whispered, turning, it's not on any map, not even in the restricted section. No, came a voice, dry as autumn leaves, echoing from everywhere, and nowhere. It is not meant for mortal eyes. From the crumbling pillars, figures emerged, tall, slender. Their skin like birch bark, their eyes deep and black as polished obsidian. The Wild Court. The eldest among them, a being with antlers sprouting from their temples, crowned with withered ivy, stepped forward, vines curled around their limbs like serpents. You have passed the first trial, the antlered one intoned. You faced the guardian of roots and survived, but survival is not absolution. Harry bristled. We didn't break your accords, we didn't even know they existed. Intent matters little, said another of the court. A woman with hair of living moss. The balance is undone. The veil thins. You are here not because you are guilty, but because you may yet be the ones to mend what was torn. Daphne folded her arms. And if we refuse? The antlered figure tilted their head. Then the forest will reclaim you, as it has reclaimed all who came before. A cold weight settled in Harry's chest. He had faced death before, stared it in the face, danced with it, but this was different. This was not a duel. This was justice older than wands, older than spells, older than blood. The second trial begins now, said the court in unison. The ground trembled, not violently, but with purpose. The ruins shifted. Stones groaned as they lifted, rearranging like bones knitting in reverse. Walls rose from dust. Towers, black and spired, spiraled upward into a cavernous dark, where no sky should be. Bioluminescent flowers bloomed along shattered streets, their light pulsing in slow, rhythmic waves. This city, the court whispered, was built on a promise, a covenant between magic and mankind. You will walk its heart. You will find the echo of the first oath, and you will return it unbroken. What happens if we don't? Harry asked. Then the city keeps you, said the moss-haired woman, as it has kept so many, forgotten, silent, art of the stone. Daphne exhaled sharply. Charming. The court turned as one, robes whispering like wind through leaves. Then they were gone, vanished into root and shadow. Only Harry and Daphne remained, standing at the edge of a dead city that breathed. Daphne looked at him, eyes narrowed, but something flickered beneath the suspicion. Fear, perhaps, or the first spark of trust. Well, Potter, she said, voice low, shall we not die today? He met her gaze and for the first time didn't look away. Let's go, he said, together. The air in the ruins tasted of stone and memory. Harry stepped forward, his boots crunching on shards of what might have once been tile, now bleached white and brittle as old bone. Before him stretched the skeletal remains of a city built not with bricks or mortar, but with living roots twisted into arches, walls and towers now petrified by centuries of decay. Vines as thick as his arm coiled around crumbling columns, pulsing faintly with a dim, greenish light that seemed to breathe in time with something far below. Daphne stopped beside him, her breath shallow. This wasn't built by wizards, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Not as we know them, no. Harry agreed. This feels older, like it remembers a time before wands. They had followed the path the wild court had marked, a trail of silver moss that glowed only under moonlight, through the deepest part of the forbidden forest, past groves where trees spoke in riddles and rivers flowed upward into the canopy. Now, at the heart of it, they stood in the ruins of the first magic. A city older than Hogwarts, older than the Ministry, older even than the oldest tales of Merlin. A low hum vibrated through the ground. The stones beneath their feet flickered with runes, etched not by hand but by root and root alone. They pulsed once, twice, then flared into life, illuminating a wide avenue paved with moss-covered slabs. Words formed in the air, not in English, but in something deeper, a language that didn't need translation because it spoke directly to the blood, the bone, the pulse. Harry reached out, fingers brushing a root wall. Instantly, images flooded his mind. Wizards in robes of bark and starlight, kneeling before towering beings of antler and shadow. A vow was spoken, not in words, but in breath and blood. Star, we will share the earth. We will honor the balance. We will not take what is not given. Star, then another vision, flames. Wizards with wands raised, cutting down sacred groves, binding dryads in iron chains, sealing ancient spirits in enchanted glass. The vow was broken, not once, not twice, 100 times over. He gasped, jerking his hand back. Daphne was already on one knee, her face pale. They weren't always like us, she said, voice trembling. The first wizards. They lived star with star magic, not above it. Harry looked around. The ruins weren't just dead. They were grieving. A wind stirred, though there were no trees left to move. From the center of the city, a mound of tangled roots began to shift. Slowly, a figure emerged, not solid, not quite real, its form woven from moss, bark, and ember light. It had no face, only 2 hollows where eyes might be, glowing with a sorrow so deep it made Harry's chest ache. Star, You walk where promises were made. Star, the figure intoned, its voice like wind through hollow reeds. Star, you breathe the air of betrayal. Star, Daphne rose, unsteady but defiant. We didn't make those promises, we weren't even born. Yet you carry their wands, Star the spirit replied. Star, you speak their spells, you live in their world, built on broken oaths. Star, Harry swallowed. We're not here to defend them, we're here to fix what we can. Silence. Then, from the ruin, whispers rose, not from the spirit, but from the stones, the roots, the very earth. A chorus of voices, ancient and tired. Star, the first trial is memory, Star the spirit said. Star, to pass, you must see what was, and choose, will you repeat their sin, or break the chain? Star, the ground split open before them. From the fissure rose two pools, still, black, reflecting not the sky, but the past. One for each of you, the spirit said. Step in, remember, and do not lie to yourself. Daphne looked at Harry, her eyes sharp with fear. And something else, recognition perhaps. They had both lived in a world built on secrets. Now they would see the foundation. He stepped forward first. Harry followed. The water swallowed them whole, and the city remembered. Rain fell in silver sheets through the canopy of the forbidden forest, each drop shimmering as if charged with silent magic. The air smelled of wet moss and something older, petrichor laced with iron, like blood buried deep in stone. Harry's boots sank into the mire as he pushed forward, his wand clutched tight, its tip casting a feeble blue light that barely cut through the gloom. Beside him, Daphne Greengrass moved with quiet precision, her cloak wrapped close, eyes scanning the shifting shadows between the trees. They're close, she murmured, not looking at him. The path ends at the standing stones. That's where the trial begins. Harry frowned. How do you know so much about this place? She paused, then glanced sideways. My family keeps old books, forgotten histories. We were taught not to speak of them, but I read them anyway. He wanted to press further, but the ground trembled beneath them, a deep, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat drawn up from the earth. The trees ahead parted, revealing a circle of towering monoliths, each carved with runes that glowed faintly green. At their center stood two figures, hulking, broad-shouldered, made of moss-covered stone, their eyes hollow pits filled with a slow-burning ember. The guardians, Daphne whispered. They don't test strength, they test sacrifice. Before Harry could respond, the left statue stepped forward, a single heavy footfall cracking the earth. Its arm lifted, not in attack, but in warning. A voice, deep and fractured like shifting boulders, echoed without sound, resonating in their bones. Star, one must fall, so the other may pass. Star, Harry took a step forward. We're not here to hurt anyone. We're answering your trial. The second guardian turned its head with a grating groan. The path is narrow. The price is paid in blood not spilled, but offered. Star, Daphne stepped beside him, voice steady. It's not about fighting them, it's about choosing. One of us has to give ourselves up, willingly. Harry looked at her, startled. You can't be serious. I am. Her eyes were cold, but not unkind. And it won't be you. He grabbed her arm. No, that's not how this works. She turned, her gaze locking onto his. You think I don't know what's at stake? If the wild court falls, the wards holding back the old dark beneath the forest will shatter. My family's name was built on keeping that buried. I won't let it rise. The guardians shifted, stepping closer, their movements slow but inexorable. You don't have to prove anything to me, Harry said. I'm not trying to. She pulled free, then stepped forward, arms raised. I offer myself. Let him pass. The air stilled. Raindrops hummed suspended mid-fall. The runes on the stones flared, pulsing once, then dimmed. The left guardian raised its massive hand, not to strike, but to point, at Harry. Star, the sacrifice is seen. The path is open. But the cost is not yet paid. Star, Harry's breath caught. Wait, she offered herself. That should be enough. The second guardian turned toward him. Star. The heart must choose when it values, not duty, not pride, but truth. Star. Understanding struck him like cold water. He stepped forward, asked Daphne, standing between her and the stone figures. No, he said. Let her pass. I stay. Daphne's breath hitched. Harry, I mean it. He didn't look at her. If one of us has to stay, it's me. Not because I'm the chosen one, or because I've done this before. Because I choose to. Silence. Then both guardians knelt. Slowly, like mountains yielding to time. The runes blazed white, and the ground beneath them softened, forming a narrow bridge of glowing stone leading through the circle. The star the trial is past. Star the voices whispered as one. Star, not by strength, nor by cunning, but by the giving of what one cannot afford to lose. Star Daphne stared at Harry, her composure cracked, eyes wide, lips parted. Rain glistened on her cheeks, or maybe it wasn't rain. You're an idiot, she said softly. He managed a crooked smile. Yeah, but I'm your idiot now. The bridge pulsed, urging them forward. Together they stepped onto it, two hearts once guarded, now bound by something neither could name. Behind them the stones groaned shut, sealing the past. Ahead the forest waited, darker, deeper, and watching. The air in the cavern tasted of damp stone and something older, moss-covered memory, perhaps, or the slow breath of the earth itself. Torchlight flickered against the walls, casting long, wavering shadows that danced like spirits. Before them, two arches stood side by side, carved from living roots and entwined with silver vines that pulsed faintly, as though fed by a heartbeat. One glowed with a soft golden light, warm as sunlight through leaves. The other pulsed with a deep emerald shimmer, cool and inviting, like the hush of a forest at dawn. They had run for hours after escaping the whispering mire, hearts pounding, voices of the wild court still echoing in their ears. Star, only one may pass unarmed. Choose wisely. Star. The words had slithered into their minds like roots seeking purchase. Now, standing at the threshold, the weight of it settled between them, heavier than any spell. Harry wiped sweat from his brow, his breath ragged. They're testing us, he said, voice low. This isn't about escape, it's about trust. Daphne didn't answer at once. She studied the arches, her expression unreadable. The green one beckoned, gentle, serene. The golden one felt demanding, honest perhaps, but hungry. She turned to him, her silver eyes catching the dim light. And what if one of us lies? What if I say I'll go through the green, but I step into the gold the moment your back is turned? Then you survive, Harry said. And I don't. She looked away, fingers brushing the hilt of the bone dagger they'd taken from the mire. You don't trust me. No, he admitted. But I'm starting to. A dry laugh escaped her. That's almost worse. Almost. Silence settled again, broken only by the distant drip of water, and the faint hum of the arches. The choice pressed down on them, not just which path to take, but what kind of people they were willing to become. Daphne stepped forward, then halted. When I was 7, my mother took me to the family crypt. We stood before my great-grandfather's tomb, and she said, "A Greengrass never shows weakness, not even in death." I believed her. For years I did everything to be strong, cold even. But out here, among things older than bloodlines and titles, that strength feels like a mask. Harry watched her, really watched her. For the first time, not as an enemy, not as a Slytherin schemer, but as someone who had also been shaped by expectations too heavy to maim. I know what that's like, he said quietly. People see the boy who lived and think they know me. But I've made choices, bad ones, selfish ones. I've left people behind. We all have, he exhaled. So what do we do? She turned to face him fully. We stop choosing star between star each other. We choose star for star each other. Before he could respond, she stepped toward the golden arch. Wait, he started. But she didn't pass through. Instead, she reached out, took his hand. Her skin was cold, but her grip was firm. You take the green. It suits you. Light, reckless, hopeful. I'll take the gold. It's sharper, like me. Harry stared at her. How do you know it won't kill one of us? I don't, she said. But I know I don't want to wake up in a world where I left you behind. Something cracked open in his chest. Something warm and terrifying. He tightened his hold on her hand. Then we go together. She blinked. The trial said, to hell with the trial. He stepped forward, pulling her with him, not toward either arch, but between them, They want us to choose who lives. But we're not their pawns. Not anymore. The air crackled. The vines along the arches shivered, then began to twist, roots groaning as they pulled apart, forming a third passage, one that hadn't been there before. A narrow path, lined with white flowers that bloomed in the dark, releasing a scent like rain on stone. Daphne let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "You're mad, Potter." "Yeah," he said, smiling faintly. "But I'm not alone." And hand in hand they stepped forward, not fleeing, not choosing one over the other, but walking together into the unknown. Behind them, the two arches collapsed into dust, as if the forest itself exhaled in relief. The air beneath the ancient canopy was thick with the scent of damp earth, and something older, moss-laden stone, petrichor, and the faint metallic tang of magic long dormant. Harry's breath came in measured pulls, his shoulders aching beneath the weight of his pack and the heavier burden of the trial he'd just survived. Beside him, Daphne stood with her back straight, her pale fingers still curled around the hilt of the silver knife she'd used to sever the thorn vine binding them during the trial of tangled oaths. Her knuckles were white. They had passed. The court had said so, though the words had been spoken not with praise, but with the cold neutrality of stone settling into place. The first trial, truth, without deception, had nearly undone them. They'd been forced to speak only in truths, their voices pulled from them by roots that coiled around their ankles and whispered in a language older than Parseltongue. Harry had confessed to his fear of failing again, of Voldemort's shadow never truly leaving. Daphne had admitted she'd once cursed a classmate for mocking her mother's name, not with magic, but with a look so icy it had made the girl weep. And yet they had survived. Now the forest seemed to breathe around them, the trees shifting ever so slightly when they weren't looking. Fireflies, or something like them, pulsed in the dark with a soft violet glow, their light casting long, trembling shadows over the moss-carpeted ground. "They're watching," Daphne murmured, not turning her head. "Not the court, something deeper." Harry glanced at her. Her profile was sharp in the dim light, her jaw tight. "You feel it too? Like a hum in the bones," she said. "Like the forest is holding its breath." A twig snapped in the distance. Not from the path. There was no path, but from the direction of the black tarn, a mirror-still lake, said to show not reflections, but possibilities. They'd avoided it. The court had warned them. Harry adjusted the strap on his shoulder. "We should keep moving. They said the second trial begins at the Standing Stones. Before the moon rises." Daphne didn't move. "You don't understand. It's not just the trials anymore. The wild court, they're afraid." He frowned. "The court? Afraid of what?" She finally turned to him, her eyes wide and silver in the twilight. "Of what's waking. The things that were here before the Fae. Before wizards. Before names." A cold wind threaded through the trees, rustling leaves that hadn't moved in centuries. From somewhere deep in the undergrowth, a low resonant hum began. Not a sound so much as a vibration, felt in the teeth and the marrow. The violet fireflies flickered, then darted away in unison, vanishing into the dark. Harry reached for his wand, but Daphne caught his wrist. "Don't, not here. Magic draws it." "Draws what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pressed a hand to the bark of the nearest tree, a gnarled, towering yew with roots like coiled serpents, and closed her eyes. A moment passed, then another. When she opened them, her voice was barely a whisper. "It remembers you." "What?" "The forest. It remembers your blood, your mother's protection. It lingers, not just in you, in the earth, in the roots." She looked at him, really looked. "That's why you passed the first trial. Truth isn't just spoken, it's recognized." Harry swallowed. The weight of that, of her seeing it, understanding it, settled over him like a cloak. And then, from the direction of the court's glade, a horn sounded, low, mournful, and wrong, as if played through water. The ground trembled once, softly, like a heartbeat beneath the soil. Daphne took a breath. "We're out of time." He nodded, and together, they turned towards the Standing Stones. Behind them, the shadows between the trees deepened, and something ancient opened its eyes. The air beneath the canopy was thick with the scent of damp moss and something older, iron and ozone. the breath of spells long forgotten. High above, the twisted boughs of ancient trees wove a lattice through which moonlight dripped like liquid silver. Beneath it, the clearing pulsed with energy, the very ground humming beneath Harry's boots. Chains of woven ivy bound his wrists, cold and alive, tightening whenever he pulled. Daphne stood beside him, pale but composed, her eyes scanning the circle of figures that loomed in the shadows. The wild court had no thrones, no banners, only presence. A centaur with bark-like skin and eyes like polished amber stepped forward, his voice low and resonant. They have passed the trial of thorns, unaided, unbroken. A ripple passed through the gathering. Some nodded. Others shifted like wind through reeds. A figure emerged from behind a standing stone, tall and slender, her hair a cascade of willow fronds, her skin the pale gray of birch bark. The Dryad. They should not have passed, she hissed. The thorn maze was meant to bleed them, to show their weakness. Instead, they turned its traps against it. The boy used fire where there should have been only pain. The girl spoke the old tongue without training. That is not chance, that is disruption. Or evolution, countered a voice like stone grinding on stone. From the roots of an ancient oak, a being shaped like a badger, but twice the size lifted its head, eyes glowing amber. The trial's test worth, not obedience. They did not cheat. They adapted. Like magic itself. A murmur rose, then stilled as a new presence made itself felt. Not a shape, not a form, just a deepening of the shadows, a pressure in the chest. The Hollow King, his voice came not through ears but through bone. The girl speaks truth. The trials were meant to fail them. Yet they do not break. They listen to the forest. They listen to each other. Harry swallowed. He had felt it too, the way the forest had shifted during the trial, as if testing them, yes, but also guiding. When the thorns had lashed at Daphne, he'd thrown a fire spell, not with rage, but with purpose. And she had whispered something in a language she claimed she didn't know, and the vines had recoiled. They grow closer, said the Dryad, voice brittle. Unity between wizard and witch was not part of the old pacts. It was forbidden. Their bond, it weakens the balance, or restores it, the badger being rumbled. The pacts were broken by the wizards long ago, but these two, they do not carry that stain. They carry something else. Something the world has forgotten how to name. Daphne turned her head slightly, just enough for Harry to catch her profile in the moonlight. Her jaw was tight, but her eyes, there was a flicker there. Not fear, not pride, recognition. The Hollow King stirred. The second trial approaches, the labyrinth of echoing names. Few survive it. Fewer emerge unchanged. If they complete it, if they speak the true name at its heart, then the old rules may no longer apply. And if they do, the Dryad pressed, if they awaken what sleeps beneath, if they call back what we buried, silence fell. Even the wind stilled. Then, from the edge of the clearing, a new voice, soft, melodic, yet edged with steel. A young satyr, no taller than a boy of 12, stepped forward, his horns still small and spiraled like a fawn's. Perhaps it is time to wake, he said. Perhaps the world has waited too long for ghosts, when it needs living hearts. The Dryad hissed, but the badger being let out a low, approving growl. Harry felt the ivy chains loosen, just slightly. He didn't dare move, but he looked at Daphne, really looked at her, the dark smudge beneath her eye, the way her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from restraint, from holding back something vast. We're not pawns, he said, voice rough. Not yours. Not theirs. Daphne met his gaze. Then we'll make our own trial. And beneath the roots, deep in the dark, something stirred, not in anger, but in answer. The air beneath the ancient canopy was thick with the scent of damp moss, and something else, something sharp and electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. Harry stepped carefully over a root that pulsed faintly blue beneath his boot, his wand gripped tight, despite the warning the Dryad had given them. Magic here answered only to the land, not to incantations. To his left, Daphne moved with a quiet grace, her pale fingers brushing the bark of a tree whose leaves shimmered like shards of mirror in the dim light. One of them detached, spiraling down like a falling star, and as it touched the mossy ground, A soft chime echoed through the clearing, low and pure, like a single note from a forgotten harp. "Did you hear that?" Harry whispered. Daphne didn't answer at first. She crouched, reaching for the leaf, but stopped an inch from touching it. "It's not meant to be held," she said. "Only heard." Another leaf fell. Then another. Each struck the earth with a different tone, some high and bright, others deep and resonant, and together they wove a melody that seemed to shift the very air around them. Harry felt it in his bones, a quiet hum that made his teeth vibrate. He looked up. The entire canopy was alive with motion, hundreds of glass-like leaves trembling in a wind he could not feel, each poised to fall, each carrying its own voice. "This is the forest memory," Daphne murmured. "The wild court doesn't write histories, they sing them." Harry swallowed. "And we're walking through it." She glanced at him, her green eyes catching the fractured light. "We're trespassing on a hymn." They moved deeper, stepping lightly, as though afraid to disrupt the music. The path, no more than a suggestion of packed earth and glowing fungi, wound between trees that leaned toward one another like worshippers at prayer. The further they went, the more the song changed. It grew darker, the notes clashing in dissonant waves, and Harry's chest tightened. He thought he heard words beneath the tones, whispers in a language that slithered through his mind like cold water. Daphne stopped abruptly. "Do you feel that?" Harry did. The ground beneath them was no longer earth, but something smooth and cool, glass, perhaps, or ice. Yet it glowed with a soft internal light, pulsing like a heartbeat. He knelt, brushing away a thin layer of silver moss. Beneath, the surface revealed patterns, circles within circles, lines that spiraled inward toward a center he couldn't see. "It's a map," Daphne said, kneeling beside him. "Or a warning." A sudden silence fell. The leaves above stilled. The song ended mid-note, as if cut by a blade. From the edge of the clearing, the river appeared, not flowing, but star-rising star, as though the ground itself had split open to reveal a vein of liquid light. It moved slowly, almost lazily, but the air above it shimmered with heatless fire. The water, if it could be called that, was translucent silver, swirling with colors that had no name. Harry watched, transfixed, as shapes formed within it, faces, hands, fragments of moments that felt like memories not his own. "Don't look too long," Daphne said, her voice tight. "It shows you what it thinks you want to see." Harry tore his gaze away. "How do you know that?" She didn't answer. Her reflection in the river's surface stared back at her with hollow eyes, whispering something Harry couldn't hear. A low vibration hummed through the ground. The glass leaves trembled again, but this time they didn't sing. They star-shivered star, as if afraid. Something was waking, and beneath the roots of the world, deep in the dark where even the oldest trees feared to grow, a single breath echoed, long, slow, and hungry. The air beneath the canopy shimmered with tiny floating lights, bioluminescent moths, or perhaps spirits, drifting like embers from a silent fire. Harry sat with his back against the gnarled root of an ancient oak, its bark etched with runes that pulsed faintly blue when he brushed his fingers over them. Across from him, Daphne Greengrass wrapped her arms around her knees, her breath forming small clouds in the cool night. The forest around them was quiet, not with absence, but with listening. Every rustle of leaf, every distant call of a creature not quite bird or beast, felt like a sentence whispered just beyond comprehension. "I never thought I'd be here," she said, voice low, almost reverent. "Not like this." Harry glanced at her. In the soft glow, her usually composed features looked younger, uncertain. "Where?" "Lost in the middle of the forbidden forest with a Gryffindor, who still can't cast a proper Patronus in the dark." She almost smiled. Almost. "No, not just lost. I meant bound, by something older than spells, older than houses." He exhaled, rubbing his palms against his trousers. "The trial of roots tomorrow. They said it'll test memory. Not just what we remember, but what we've buried." Daphne's gaze flickered to the ground. "They know, don't they? The court. They see through us. Like we're made of glass. I think they see what we try not to." He hesitated. "Like how you flinched when the bark spirits sang." "Not fear. Recognition." She looked up sharply. "You notice that?" "I notice more than people think." He met her eyes. "You've heard that song before. In a dream, maybe. Or somewhere else. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into the folds of her cloak and pulled out a small silver locket, delicate, tarnished with age. She didn't open it, just held it between her fingers like a confession. She wasn't ready to speak. "My grandmother gave this to me," she said, "on my 7th birthday. She said it was from a time when our family wasn't just about blood and alliances, when we listened to the old magic." Harry stayed quiet. The moths swirled above them, casting shifting patterns on her face. "She vanished," Daphne whispered. "Not dead, not gone. Star taken. Star, the ministry called it a tragic accident. But I remember what she whispered before the door closed behind her. Star, when the roots remember, so will you. Star, I didn't understand. Not until now." Harry's chest tightened. "And the locket? It hums," she said. "When we're near the old places, like it's answering something." He thought of the visions he'd had in the Trial of Stones, the flash of green light, not just his mother's scream, but another voice beneath it, chanting in a language with no name, a woman's voice, not Lily's. "You think your grandmother was tied to the Wild Court?" he asked. "I think she knew the truth," Daphne said. "About the Accords, about why they're angry. And I think she tried to protect me by making me forget." Silence settled again, but it was different now, denser, woven with unspoken understanding. Harry looked down at his hands. "I've been dreaming too, not just Voldemort. There's a tree, deep underground, with roots wrapped around chains, and every night the chains creak, like something's waking." Daphne's breath caught. "That's not a dream. That's a warning. They're connected, aren't they?" he said. "The trials, the court, the thing beneath the forest. This isn't just about punishment. It's a test, but also a kind of rescue." She nodded slowly. "We're not just being judged. We're being star-chosen star, whether we like it or not." A moth landed on her wrist, its light pulsing in time with the locket's faint vibration. Harry reached out, not touching her, but close enough to feel the warmth between them. "If we fail," he said, "it's not just us who pay." "No," she whispered. "This is the beginning of something worse." And in that moment, beneath the watchful glow of ancient lights, the distance between them, the years of house rivalry, silence in the corridors, the weight of names and legacies, crumbled like dry earth. They weren't just bound by the court's decree. They were bound by what they carried, what they remembered, what they were afraid to say out loud. But for the first time, they weren't afraid to say it to each other. The air tasted of iron and damp earth, thick with the scent of crushed moss, and something older, the musk of roots that had grown for centuries beneath stone and silence. Harry's fingers brushed the wall of the labyrinth, and the vine recoiled like a startled serpent, pulsing with a faint greenish light beneath its bark. It wasn't just alive, it was watching. Beside him, Daphne exhaled slowly, her breath a pale wisp in the dim, filtered light. "It knows we're here," she said, voice low, almost reverent. Her wand was drawn, but she held it like a blade, not a spellcaster's tool. "It's not just a maze, it's remembering us." Harry nodded, jaw tight. The first 2 trials had stripped them bare. The trial of echoes, where their pasts had spoken through stone. The trial of ash, where they'd faced illusions of their own failures, twisted by ancient magic. But this was different. The forest had swallowed them whole. One moment they stood before the wild court, the fey judges with eyes like frozen stars. The next, the ground had split beneath their feet, and the earth folded in on itself, carrying them down, into a place where time bent like saplings. Now the walls breathed. Vines curled and uncurled overhead, forming arches and dead ends in slow, deliberate movements. Roots shifted underfoot, guiding or misleading. It was impossible to tell. The labyrinth was not merely enchanted. It was a living memory, a wound in the world that remembered the first betrayal, the breaking of the old pact between wizard and wild. "We can't fight it," Harry said. "Not like before." "No," Daphne agreed. "We have to. Listen." She stepped forward, hand outstretched, not with defiance, but offering. A single vine, thick as her wrist and veined with silver, lowered toward her. It paused, quivered. Then gently, it brushed her palm. A sound like wind through ancient leaves filled the air. Not a voice, but something deeper, older. Images flickered at the edge of Harry's vision. A grove bathed in moonlight, wizards with their wands lowered in peace, hands clasped with antlered figures beneath a canopy of stars. Then fire. Then silence. The breaking. He swallowed. "They weren't lying," he murmured. "We did this." Daphne didn't answer. Her eyes were closed, her face pale. When she opened them, they glistened. "It's not just about punishment," she whispered. "It's grief. The labyrinth isn't testing us to destroy us. It's asking if we can mourn what we've lost, what we destroyed." A path opened before them, not by force, but by choice, the vines parting like a curtain. But as they stepped forward, the ground trembled. A low guttural hum vibrated through the earth, and the air turned cold. From the shadows ahead, something moved, not plant, not spirit, but something in between. A figure, tall and hunched, woven from thorn and shadow, with eyes like dying embers. It dragged a chain made of petrified roots, and where it stepped, the vines blackened and withered. Daphne's hand found Harry's. "That's not part of the trial," she said, voice steady, despite the fear beneath. "That's what's been feeding on the wound." The thing let out a sound, a cracked, broken version of the labyrinth's song, a perversion. It remembered too, but not with sorrow. With rage. Harry tightened his grip on his wand. "Then we finish the trial before it finishes us." Daphne gave a single nod. Together, they moved as one, not as prisoner and partner, not as rival heirs of warring houses, but as two whom had seen the truth beneath the myth. The labyrinth pulsed around them, uncertain. The trial was no longer just about survival, it was about atonement, and the thing in the dark knew it. The air inside the labyrinth tasted of damp moss, and something older, something that hummed beneath the skin. Walls of interwoven roots pulsed faintly, like veins beneath bark, shifting when neither Harry nor Daphne looked directly at them. They had entered together, backs nearly touching, but the moment the ivy-choked arch sealed behind them with a sound like a sigh, the path split with unnatural precision. "Stay close," Harry said, fingers brushing his wand. The words felt hollow even as he spoke them. The maze didn't just bend space, it bent thought. Daphne's voice came from his left, then his right. "I am star close, or I was." Her tone was steady, but he heard the tremor beneath it, the way her breath caught when the shadows deepened. Then she wasn't there at all. Silence pressed in, thick and unnatural. The trees, no, not trees, not quite, leaned inward. Their trunks nodded with faces that blinked slowly, mouths whispering in a language that slithered just beyond understanding. Harry turned, wand raised, but every corridor looked the same. Roots coiling like serpents, blowing lichen casting long, shifting shadows. A flicker, a shape. He followed it, down a narrowing path, beneath a canopy of thorned vines that parted as he approached. Then he saw her. Daphne stood in a clearing, pale as moonlight, her dark hair unbound. She wasn't alone. A figure in silver robes stood before her, tall eyes like polished amber, skin like birch bark. The seemly envoy who had sentenced them. But this couldn't be real. The wild court was miles above. "You don't belong here, Potter," the figure said, not turning. "She knows it. She's always known." Harry stepped forward. "Daphne." She lifted a hand, not looking at him. "Stop. Just stop." Her voice cracked. "He's right. You're reckless. You trust too easily. You don't see the cost." "That's not true," Harry said, but the words felt thin. Because wasn't it? Hadn't Sirius died because he trusted too much? Hadn't Dumbledore? The illusion, because its star had star to be an illusion, shifted. Now it was Ginny standing where Daphne had been, her face streaked with tears. "You left me," she whispered. "You always leave." Harry staggered back. "No." Then it was Ron, cold-eyed. "You used us. Used everyone." The maze breathed around him, feeding on his doubt. The walls pulsed faster, roots writhing like anxious fingers. He leaned against a trunk, gasping. This wasn't real. None of it. But the pain was. Meanwhile, Daphne walked another path, one lined with frost despite the humid air. Her breath plumed white. The trees here were skeletal, their branches etched with silver runes that burned when she read them. A mirror stood in the center of a frozen glade. She didn't want to look, but she did. Her reflection smiled, a version of herself, with sharper eyes, colder grace. "You're afraid," the reflection said. "Afraid he'll see you. Really see you." Then walk away. I don't care what Potter thinks, Daphne said aloud, but her voice wavered. Do you not? The reflection tilted its head. Then why did you lie to your mother? Why did you hide your wand when the house elf broke the vase? You're still the girl who smiles behind closed doors. That was survival, Daphne snapped. And this? What is this, if not another performance? Another role. The cool, unshakable Greengrass. But you tremble when he speaks. You listen when he laughs. No, face it, you want him to matter. The mirror cracked, then shattered, and from the shards rose whispers. Her father's voice, her grandmother's, all the voices that told her weakness was death. Emotion was vulnerability. She sank to her knees. Somewhere deep in the heart of the maze, a bell tolled, once, low and resonant. The roots stilled. The illusions flickered. Harry stood, wiping sweat from his brow. The visions were gone, but the ache remained. He didn't know how he knew, but he did. She was in trouble. He ran, not down the path, but star through star it, wrenching aside roots, ignoring the thorns that bit into his arms. The maze fought him, twisting corridors, looping back on itself. But he thought of Daphne, not the girl from Slytherin who never glanced his way, but the one who had shared her rations in the cave, who had whispered strategy in the dark, who had looked at him once, just once, like he might be worth something. Daphne, he shouted, voice raw. And then he saw her, kneeling, pale, arms wrapped around herself like she might break. He didn't hesitate. He reached for her hand. The moment their fingers touched, the maze screamed. Roots recoiled. The wall split open, revealing a sky streaked with twilight. And between them, lying in the moss, was the first token, a silver acorn, glowing with quiet fire. Neither spoke, but Daphne didn't let go. The air in the glade tasted of moss and iron, thick with the breath of unseen things. Harry's fingers twitched at his side, brushing the rough bark of the standing stone behind him. Before them, a pool of black water lay still as glass, its surface reflecting not the canopy above, but shifting shadows, faces half-formed, voices murmuring just beneath hearing. The third trial had begun without ceremony. Daphne stood a few paces away, arms crossed, her jaw tight. She hadn't spoken since the Fey Warden had led them here, whispering one phrase before vanishing. Star, what cannot be lied about, will drown you if you do not speak it. Star, this is a trick, she said now, voice low. They want us to confess, to weaken ourselves. Harry glanced at her. Or they want us to be honest, something the court thinks we've forgotten how to do. She turned sharply. Honest? You, the boy who lived? The Golden Savior. Do you even know what that means to people like me? To pure-blood kids who were taught to watch the horizon for your shadow. He flinched. I didn't ask for that. No, she said, but you never questioned it either. You walked into Hogwarts like you belonged, like the world owed you safety, while the rest of us had to calculate every word, every alliance, every breath. The pool rippled. A whisper rose, Star liar, 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 star, in a chorus of children's voices. Harry stepped forward. And what about you? You played the Ice Queen so well, I forgot you were real. But you're not as untouchable as you pretend. I saw you last year, after the attack on Hogsmeade. You were shaking, you hid it behind that smirk, but you were terrified. Daphne's breath caught. The water darkened. And you think that makes me weak? Her voice cracked. You think I don't know what fear is? My father used to say the world would burn if the old blood didn't hold it together. And when he looked at me, he saw the future, like I was already a pawn in a game I didn't want to play. So yes, I was afraid. I still am, but I don't parade my pain like a banner. I survive. The pool shuddered. A hand, translucent and silver, rose from its depths, pointing at her. No, she whispered. I won't. But the water pulled. Cold seeped into her bones. She fell to her knees, fingers clawing the damp earth. Harry moved without thinking. He caught her arm. Fight it. She looked up, eyes wide. Not with fear, but with something raw. I don't want to be what they made me. I don't want to marry someone for politics. I don't want to raise children to whisper secrets in pure-blood parlors. I want to choose. The hand retreated. The water stilled. For a moment, only the wind moved. Then it was Harry's turn. The pool turned red. Heat rose from its surface. He stepped back, but roots slithered from the soil, wrapping his ankles. "Star, speak." Star, the glade seemed to hum. "Star, or drown. Star, you want truth." He swallowed. "Fine. I'm tired. I'm so tired of being the one who has to fix everything. I never asked to be the chosen one. I never wanted to be famous. And sometimes I wonder if I'd be better off dead. If it would be easier." Daphne's eyes widened. "Harry." "No, let me say it. Because it's true. And I've never told anyone, not Ron, not Hermione. I smile, I fight, I do what's expected, but inside, I'm scared all the time. Not of dying, of failing, again, of watching someone else burn, because I wasn't fast enough, clever enough, star enough. Star." The roots loosened. The pool calmed. A single drop fell from the sky, then another. Rain, soft and warm, began to fall. Daphne rose slowly. She looked at him, not with pity, but with something like understanding. "You're not a savior, Harry, you're just a boy. And that might be the greatest thing I've ever heard." He gave a shaky laugh. "And you're not just a pure-blood heiress. You're fierce. And smarter than you let on. And Merlin helped me. I think I trust you." She almost smiled. Almost. "Don't get sentimental. We're not out of this yet." But when she reached for his hand, she didn't let go. The air in the maze thickened as they moved deeper, clinging to their skin like damp silk. Twisted hawthorn branches arched overhead, weaving a canopy so dense that twilight reigned even at midday. Every footstep sank slightly into moss that pulsed with a faint, rhythmic glow, blue-green, like drowned starlight. Harry's breath came in measured bursts, wand gripped tight, while Daphne moved beside him with the quiet precision of someone trained to listen before acting. "This place is alive," she murmured, brushing a hand along a vine that recoiled at her touch, curling inward like a wounded thing. "Not just enchanted, alive in a way I've never felt before." Harry nodded, eyes scanning the shifting walls. The maze changed when they weren't looking. Paths closed behind them, new corridors, opened with a sound like cracking bone. They'd been walking for hours, guided only by a whispering wind that carried fragments of song in a language older than Latin. Then the ground sloped downward. The moss darkened beneath their feet, turning ashen. The air grew colder, and the silence deepened. Not empty, but heavy, as if the forest were holding its breath. Ahead the hawthorn parted like a wound, revealing a circular clearing cradled in the roots of a colossal dead tree. At its center lay a creature. Harry froze. It was deer-like in form, but too large, too still. Its hide shimmered faintly, like oil on water, shifting from silver to deep green as if reflecting unseen seasons. Antlers of living crystal branched from its skull, now cracked and dim. One eye remained open, ancient, luminous, the color of a rain-heavy sky. It was dying. Daphne stepped forward first, her boots whispering over the dead moss. "It's the heart," she said, voice barely audible. "Not just of this maze, of the wild court's magic. I've read about it. In fragments. A being older than any wizarding bloodline. It sustains the balance." Harry knelt beside it, hesitant. The creature's breath was shallow, each exhale misting with faint gold. "Can we help it?" Daphne crouched, pulling a slim silver vial from her cloak. "It's been poisoned, not by blade or spell, but by neglect. The treaties were broken. The offerings stopped. The wizards forgot their oaths." Harry looked at her. "So we're being punished for what others did." "Not punished," she said softly. "Tested. The wild court doesn't care about vengeance. It cares about balance. If the heart dies, the forest will turn. Not just this maze, everything. The magic that holds the boundary between our world and theirs will unravel." A low groan shuddered through the ground. The crystal antlers flickered, then dimmed further. "There's a way," Daphne whispered, "but it requires sacrifice. Not blood, not pain, memory." Harry frowned. "Memory." She met his gaze. "True memory, the kind that shapes who you are, You must offer a piece of yourself, not something you can spare. Something you need, he swallowed. Like what? Something that hurts to lose. The creature stirred, its great eye fixing on Harry. In that moment he felt it, not with words, but with a deep, wordless knowing. It saw the scar at his forehead, the weight in his chest, the dreams of green light, and a woman's scream. And it asked. Harry closed his eyes. He thought of his mother's voice, faint, fractured, buried beneath years of silence. He remembered once hearing her sing, a lullaby, soft, safe, a memory so fragile he'd never dared touch it, afraid it would vanish. That was what it wanted. He exhaled. All right. He leaned forward, pressing his palm to the creature's forehead. The world folded in, cold, darkness. Then warmth, a voice, soft, trembling, singing, a cradle, a hand stroking his hair, Lily's face, blurred by time, smiling through tears. The memory unraveled from him like thread from a spool, drawn out by invisible hands. They poured into the creature, shimmering in the air before sinking into its cracked antlers. Harry gasped, falling back. The song was gone, not forgotten, but distant now, like a dream upon waking. He could recall that it happened, but the sound, the exact tone, it was fading. Beside him, Daphne watched, her eyes glistening. Then the heart stirred, light flared from its antlers, golden and fierce. The moss beneath them brightened, spreading emerald veins through the ashen ground. The dead tree groaned, and new buds burst from its branches, unfurling leaves of silver. But deep beneath the roots, something else moved. A breath, not the forest's, something older and hungry. The air in the hollow chamber was thick with the scent of damp stone and ancient rock, a silence so complete it pressed against Harry's eardrums like deep water. Before them, sprawled across a moss-eaten dais of black basalt, lay the creature, a wormling of the old woods, its scaled hide cracked and peeling, its breath shallow and uneven. Its eyes, once bright as foxfire, were dim, flickering like dying embers. Around its body roots pulsed faintly, threaded with veins of silver light that had nearly faded to ash. Daphne knelt beside it, her fingers hovering just above the creature's chest. "It's not dead," she whispered. "But it's bound to this place, the trial. It wanted us to take its magic, to use it as a key." Harry swallowed, his throat tight. The third trial had been laid before them in riddles and shadows. Star, prove the heart of man is not greed. Take what is offered, or give what you have. Star, the altar behind them pulsed with runes, hungry, waiting. They had fought through thorned mazes and spoken truths that bled from their lips like wounds. They had survived illusions that tore open old scars. But this was different. "They're watching," Harry murmured, glancing up at the archway. Silhouettes shifted in the gloom, elongated figures with antlers and bark-like skin, the judges of the wild court. They said nothing, but their stillness was heavier than any threat. Daphne turned to him, her face pale in the dim light. "If we take its power, we win. We walk free, but it dies. And if we don't," Harry asked, already knowing the answer, "then we fail, and we're theirs." He looked down at the wormling. Its tail twitched once, a feeble motion. He remembered Hagrid's voice, warm and rough. "Star, every creature's got a right to live, Harry, even the ones no one remembers." Star. He thought of Hedwig, of Sirius, of so many who had given too much. Of Cedric. "We can't take it," he said quietly. Daphne studied him, her cool Slytherin mask slipping just enough to reveal something raw beneath. "You're serious. I've spent my whole life fighting people who took what they wanted. I won't become one of them." She exhaled, long and slow. Then, with a small, almost imperceptible nod, she reached into her robes and pulled out her wand. Not to cast, but to break. "No," Harry said, catching her wrist. "Not like that." She looked at him, startled. "There's another way," he said. "The trial said, give what you have, not our wands, not our lives, our magic." Her eyes widened. "You can't mean—" "I do. To give one's magic was not like breaking a wand. It was surrendering a part of the soul. It could leave a wizard hollow, a squib with memories of power. And there was no guarantee it would work." But Daphne didn't hesitate. She placed her wand gently on the stone, and clasped his hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was steady. "On three?" she asked. He nodded. They stepped onto the dais together, flanking the wormling. Harry closed his eyes and thought of warmth, the hearth at the burrow, the glow of a Patronus, the quiet courage of standing when all you wanted was to run. Daphne thought of protection, of the shield she'd built around herself, of the first time she'd cast a spell just to make something beautiful. Their magic came not in a burst, but a slow, golden unraveling, threads of light winding from their chests, their fingertips, their breath. It streamed into the creature, weaving through its cracks, sealing the wounds, reigniting the silver in its veins. The chamber trembled. Above, the watchers stirred. A low hum rose from the stones, ancient and approving. The wormling gasped and breathed deep. Its eyes opened, blazing with life. And the wild court bowed. The air beneath the ancient oaks of the forbidden forest had gone still, thick with the scent of wet earth, and something older, something that hummed beneath the roots, and pulsed in the moss-covered stones of the wild court's days. Harry stood with Daphne at his side, their wrists still marked with faint silver bindings that had not yet fully dissolved. Around them, the assembled fae, satyrs with bark-like skin, dryads whose hair drifted like willow fronds, and shadowed weirds with eyes like polished jet, watched in silence. The trial was over. The verdict had been spoken, but no one moved. From the center of the clearing, where the mossy stone altar had cracked during the final trial, a low tremor shivered through the ground. A sound like wind through hollow bones echoed, not from the trees, but from the earth itself. Then, slowly, impossibly, the creature emerged. It was neither beast nor spirit, not wholly alive, nor truly dead. Its form twisted like smoke, given shape. Antlers sprouting from a skull that shifted between stag and serpent, wings of gossamer shadow unfurling from its back, eyes that burned with twin embers of silver flame. The assembled fae dropped to one knee. Even the eldest weird, who had spoken the charges, bowed his head. "You were never the judge," Daphne whispered, her voice tight. "You were the trial." The creature tilted its head, regarding her with an ancient, knowing sorrow. When it spoke, its voice was not a sound but a resonance, felt in the marrow, heard in dreams. "I was the wound." Harry's breath caught. The words settled like stones in water. For centuries, wizards broke the old pacts. They cut down sacred groves. They bound fae to spells without consent. They forgot the oaths sworn under starlight and blood. When the last guardian died, I was buried, sealed beneath the roots, sustained only by rage and memory. It took a long breath, a gust that stirred the leaves into spirals. "You did not come to conquer. You did not seek power. You hesitated when the choice was life or victory. You, both of you, laid hands not to harm, but to heal." Harry remembered the dying dryad in the glade, her roots poisoned by cursed silver. Daphne had knelt first, whispering an old warding charm, something from her family's forgotten grimoire. He had used the last of his phoenix-touched wandlight to mend the blight, even as the trial demanded speed, not mercy. "You pass not because you were strong, but because you remembered what wizards have long forgotten," the creature said. "Compassion is not weakness, it is the oldest magic." Daphne swallowed. "Then why the trials? Why put us through all of this? To awaken what sleeps beneath. The bindings were not to punish you, but to keep its star sealed. The trials tested whether new stewards could bear the weight." "What is its star?" Harry asked. "The forest holds many wounds. One stirs, a hunger older than the court. It feeds on broken oaths, on forgotten names, and it grows stronger." A silence followed, heavy with implication. "You are free to go," the creature said. "The bindings are lifted. The court will not hunt you. But you may still choose." Daphne narrowed her eyes. "Choose what? To return. To stand as bridge. Not as conquerors, not as subjects, but as keepers of balance." Harry looked at her, then really looked. Her face was smudged with dirt, her robes torn at the shoulder, but her eyes were clear, sharp. He thought of Hogwarts, of the Ministry's lies, of the way magic had become a tool, not a trust. "I didn't come here to start a war," he said quietly, "but I won't walk away knowing something's coming." Daphne exhaled almost a laugh. "You always were terrible at walking away, Potter." And you're always hiding how much you care, Greengrass. She smirked. Then after a pause, I'll stay, for now. The creature made a sound like wind through reeds, perhaps approval. Then it began to dissolve, fading into the roots, the air, the very soil. Its final words drifted like ash on a breeze. The first trial was survival. The second, truth. The third has already begun. And deep beneath the trees, something ancient stirred. The air beneath the canopy was thick with the scent of wet earth and ancient stone, a damp musk that clung to the skin like a second breath. Harry stepped forward first, his boots sinking slightly into the moss-covered flagstones of the wild court's inner circle. The silence was absolute now, no rustle of unseen creatures, no whisper of wind through the twisted boughs above. Even the bioluminescent fungi that lined the roots of the great oaks seemed to dim as the two returned, Daphne at his side, their robes singed and stained from the trials, their faces drawn with exhaustion and resolve. Before them, the thrones of the wild court rose like gnarled roots from the forest floor, occupied by beings older than memory. The high judge, a tall figure with bark-like skin and eyes like polished amber, watched without blinking. To his left, the river speaker stirred, her silver hair drifting as though underwater. Her voice, the ripple of a brook, turned cold. To his right, the hollow stag lowered his antlered head slowly, breath steaming in the chill. "You have passed the trials," the high judge intoned, each word resonating through the stone. "By ancient law, we are bound to accept the verdict." A low growl rumbled from the shadowed archway, and a figure stepped forward. Thorn, the last of the iron sprites, his body forged of living bramble and iron shards. "Wizards do not change," he spat, thorns quivering along his arms. "They break oaths like twigs. They burn forests for sport. They cage creatures in towers and call it protection." Harry stiffened, but Daphne stepped forward, her voice calm, cutting through the tension like moonlight through fog. "We are not here to defend what wizards have done. We are here to show what they might become." Thorn turned his burning eyes on her. "You girl with your silver tongue and noble blood, you think a few trials make you one of us." "I think nothing," Daphne said, lifting her chin. "I know only that I stood in the heart of the whispering ruin, and spoke the forgotten name of the earth, that I walked the bridge of sorrows without flinching, that I chose not to kill when I could have, and that Harry Potter, not the boy who lived, not the chosen one, but the man beside me, offered his magic to heal the wound in the veil, even knowing it might kill him." A murmur passed through the gathered fae. Some shifted in their seats, others remained stone still. The hollow stag exhaled, long and slow. "The magic you restored, it was not small. The veil trembles less tonight because of you." But the river speaker rose, her voice now a current pulling at the edges of reason. "And what of tomorrow, when the fear returns? When the ministry sends more hunters into the dark? Will your trials mean anything then?" Harry looked around, meeting each gaze in turn. "I don't know," he said simply. "I can't promise what wizards will do, but I can promise this. I've seen what's beneath the trees. I felt the pulse of something waking, something that doesn't care for wizard or fae or beast. It's hungry, and it's getting stronger." The high judge raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. "The trials have been completed. The law is clear. These two are free. More than that, they are recognized." Thorn sneered. "Recognition is not trust." "No," Harry said quietly. "But it's a start." Then from deep within the forest, a low tremor shuddered through the ground. The moss beneath their feet darkened, veins of black spreading like rot. The air turned sharp, metallic. Even the light seemed to recoil. The high judge stood. "It is awake," he whispered. "The root that devours." And in that moment the court's divisions meant nothing. The old grudges, the ancient wounds, they would have to wait, because something older than oaths, older than magic itself, was rising. The air beneath the roots of the forbidden forest had grown thick, sour with the scent of wet stone and something older, something that tasted of iron and rotting leaves. Harry's breath came in shallow bursts, his palm pressed against the cold, pulsing wall of the cavern tunnel. Beside him, Daphne stood rigid, her wand flickering with a weak blue light that barely pushed back the dark. The silence was wrong, not peaceful, not empty, but watchful. like the forest itself was holding its breath. "They said the trials were guarded," Daphne whispered, her voice brittle. "But they never said, by star this star." They said native 2% same. And Harry didn't answer. His scar had begun to ache again, not the sharp, stabbing pain he'd known with Voldemort, but a slow, insistent throb, as if something were pressing against the inside of his skull. He turned his head slightly, catching a flicker in the shadows. Not movement, a star-present star, something vast and coiled beneath the earth. Then the ground trembled. Not an earthquake, no, this was deliberate. A single pulse, like a heartbeat, rising from deep below. The walls shuddered, and dust rained from the ceiling. Daphne stumbled, and Harry caught her arm, dragging her back as a crack split the stone at their feet. From the fissure, a dark mist curled upward, thick as oil, shimmering with faint emerald sparks. "No," Daphne breathed. "That's not possible. That's star-binding star magic. Ancient binding." The mist swirled, forming shapes, tall, gaunt figures with antlered heads, their eyes hollow. The wild fae, but not as Harry had seen them in the court, proud and regal. These were twisted, their forms flickering between beauty and decay, like reflections in broken glass. A voice followed, not spoken, but pressed directly into their minds, cold and layered with echoes. "Star, you broke the pact. You spilled sacred blood upon the roots. You star forgot star. Harry, step forward, jaw tight. We didn't make that pact. Our ancestors did. But trying to... Star, no excuses. Star," the voice cracked, like a dying wind. "Star, the balance is broken. The betrayer wakes. Star." The fissure widened. The mist surged, coalescing into a towering figure. A man, or what had once been one. His robes were torn, woven from shadow and ivy, and his face, it was half-rotted, one eye milky white, the other burning with green fire. Chains of thorn vines wrapped around his limbs, but they were splitting, snapping like dry twigs. Daphne gasped. "He's one of them, a judge, but he was star-sealed star, for treason. He tried to start a war between wizards and fae. And now he's awake," Harry finished, drawing his wand. The spirit's head turned, low, deliberate. "Star, Harry Potter," Star hissed it. "The boy who lived, the boy who Star killed Star." Star, a skeletal hand lifted. "Star, and you Greengrass, blood of the Pact Breakers. You carry their arrogance in your bones." Star. Harry felt a surge of anger. "We're not here to fight. We're here to fix it." "Fix?" The spirit laughed, a sound like crumbling bark. "You cannot fix what you do not understand. You are star children, Star, playing with fire in a forest already burning." The air grew heavier. The torches along the tunnel wall snuffed out one by one. Even Daphne's wand light dimmed. The spirit rose higher, the chains fully broken now. And with each link that fell, the cavern seemed to star-breathe Star in relief. "He's feeding on it," Daphne said, low and urgent. "On the anger, the old grudges, the wild court's hatred of wizards. It's star-powering Star him." Harry looked at her. "Then we stop giving it to him." "How?" "He's not a man. He's a star-wound star in the world. Then we close it." Harry raised his wand. "Together." She hesitated, just a heartbeat, then nodded. On 3, they stepped forward, wands raised, voices joining, in a chant older than either of them, a spell Daphne had found in a crumbling grimoire, beneath the ruins of an elven watchtower. The words tasted strange on Harry's tongue, guttural, ancient, but as they spoke a faint silver light bloomed between them, weaving into a net of shimmering threads. The spirit screamed. Not in pain, but in fury. The forest above groaned in answer. Trees uprooted themselves in the distance. A storm gathered beneath the canopy, though there was no sky. The trial had changed. The real test had just begun. The ground split without warning. One moment, Harry stood at the edge of the obsidian glade, the air thick with the scent of burnt sage and old iron, and the next, the earth beneath his boots cracked open like shattered glass. A low, guttural groan rose from the depths, not sound but vibration, a pulse that rattled his teeth and made Daphne stumble against his shoulder. She caught herself quickly, wand already in hand, her breath short and sharp. She caught a Shep whiskered, eyes scanning the widening fissure. Smoke curled from the chasm, not black, but silver, a liquid, shifting vapor that writhed like living thread. Roots snapped as the forest floor heaved, ancient oaks tilting like drunken sentinels. Somewhere in the distance, a howl cut through the canopy. Not wolf, not man, but something that remembered both. Harry tightened his grip on his wand. They weren't supposed to start the unraveling yet. They didn't, Daphne said, voice low with dread. It's happening on its own. The third trial had ended in silence. A hollow victory. They'd retrieved the heartstone from the drowned temple beneath the quicksand marsh, returned it to the altar beneath the moonlit oak, spoken the binding words in the old tongue, but the court had not lifted the sentence. Instead, the High Warden, a being of bark and starlight, had looked upon them with eyes like dying coals and said, "The veils are thin, you are too late." Now the magic that had held the wild court's realm together for centuries was fraying at the edges. Spells older than language bled into the world like ink in water, twisting reality. A patch of moss on a nearby stone flickered. For a heartbeat, it was a swarm of moths, then a child's hand, then gone. "We need to move," Harry said. Daphne nodded, but her gaze lingered on the silver smoke. "That's not just magic. It's memory, raw, unfiltered." He didn't ask how she knew. Over the past weeks, Daphne had revealed more of her family's secrets than she'd ever intended. Bloodlines entwined with the old pacts, knowledge buried beneath generations of silence. She could feel the unraveling in her bones. She'd told him once, like a song sung backward. They ran through the shifting woods where trees bent and groaned as if trying to remember their shape. They pushed forward. The path behind them collapsed into a tangle of thorn and shadow. A centaur burst from the undergrowth, eyes wild, bowstring taut, but he didn't see them. He loosed an arrow at the sky, where the stars now pulsed in erratic rhythms, and vanished into the mist. Then came the whispers. At first, Harry thought it was the wind, a hiss beneath the canopy, syllables half-formed. But soon they grew clearer. Names, his name, Star Harry. "Help us, Star." He stopped. Daphne grabbed his arm. "Don't listen," she said. "It's not real." "It's serious," he whispered. "And Lupin." "I can hear them. They're not them," she snapped. "It's the magic. It's feeding on grief, on memory. Keep moving." But then the voice changed. "James," it breathed. "Lily." Harry froze. Daphne turned, her face pale in the eerie light. "Harry, please." He didn't answer. The voice was inside his head now. Not a whisper, but a sob. His mother. Her last breath. The cold floor of Godric's Hollow. A hand touched his chest. Warm, steady, Daphne's. "Look at me," she said. Not the voice. "Look at me." He met her eyes. Gray, like stormlight. Fierce. "You're not alone," she said. "Not now." The moment broke. The ground heaved again, and a rift opened beneath them. They leapt apart as the earth swallowed the space between them. When the tremors stilled, they were on opposite sides of a chasm now, 20 feet wide, the silver smoke rising like a curtain between them. Harry shouted her name. She shook her head. "There's no time. Go. The Heartstone. It's not stable. If it fails, the whole realm collapses. And you?" "I'll find another way," she called back. "Just run." He hesitated, but the forest screamed around him, trees splitting, roots tearing upward like screaming mouths. And he turned. Behind him, the world unraveled. Ahead, something darker stirred beneath the roots of the earth, waking at last. The air tasted of iron and rain, thick with the scent of damp earth, and something older, something that pulsed beneath the roots of the forest, like a slow, wounded heartbeat. Harry's breath came in short gasps as he pressed his palm against the crumbling stone arch, its surface etched with runes that flickered like dying embers. Around them, the glade shuddered. Trees groaned as their trunks twisted unnaturally, bark splitting into weeping fissures. The sky above, once a bruised twilight, now cracked like old glass, revealing glimpses of a starless void. "They're failing," Daphne whispered, her voice taut. She stood a few paces away, wand clenched in white-knuckled fingers. Her robes were torn at the hem, singed from the last trial's fire serpents. The bindings, the ones we restored, they're unraveling. Harry turned to her, his glasses askew. Then we fix them again. And how? She snapped, eyes flashing. We barely survived the first time. That wasn't just magic we were fighting, it was memory, pain. The forest remembers every betrayal. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped toward her, each footfall unnaturally loud in the trembling silence. The ground beneath them softened, as if the earth itself were breathing. He could feel it, the weight of centuries pressing down, the sorrow of oaths unkept, the fury of guardians long forgotten. There's another way, he said. The elder Dryad, before she vanished, she said the bond wasn't just between us and the trials. It's between us. Daphne stared at him. What are you talking about? The wild court didn't just bind us to the trials. They bound us to each other. Magic like this, it doesn't just demand sacrifice. It demands unity. He hesitated. Maybe not just partnership. Maybe trust. She let out a bitter laugh. You expect me to trust you, Potter? You who still sees the world in black and white? I've spent years learning to survive by not trusting anyone. And yet, here we are, he said quietly. Still alive, because we didn't stab each other in the back, because we kept going. He took another step. I don't know everything. I don't understand half of what's happening. But I know this. If we don't do something now, this whole place collapses. And if it does, the rot spreads. To Hogwarts. To Hogsmeade. To everywhere. A low rumble rolled through the ground. A nearby willow split down the middle, its sap glowing an eerie blue before it, blackened and crumbled to ash. Daphne's breath hitched. She looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, Harry saw past the ice in her eyes. Fear. Not just for herself, but for something deeper. The world unraveling. The cost of silence. Then what? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. What do we do? He reached out his hand. We combine our magic, not as two separate forces, as one. Like the runes said, 2 souls, 1 breath, 1 pulse, 1 light. She stared at his outstretched hand. And if it doesn't work, then we die together, he said. But not before we try. A long silence. Then slowly, she placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, the world stilled. Magic surged, not from wands, not from words, but from somewhere deeper. A current of raw, ancient power spiraled up from the earth, through their joined hands, through their bones. Harry gasped. It wasn't pain, it was too pure for that. But it was overwhelming, like drowning in starlight. He felt her thoughts brush against his. Not words, but feelings. Her mother's last smile, the cold weight of her family's expectations, the quiet loneliness of the Slytherin dungeons. And she, in turn, felt his scars fire, the echo of his parents' voices, the crushing weight of being Star, the boy who lived Star, then Remard. But beneath it all, something brighter. A determination, a stubborn refusal to let go. The runes on the arch blazed white. The cracks in the sky began to seal. The trees straightened, their wounds knitting closed. The forest exhaled. And in that moment, bound not by law or magic alone, but by something far more fragile, something human, they held on. The air beneath the canopy was thick with the scent of damp earth, and something older, moss-covered stone, weeping ancient secrets, roots that pulsed like veins beneath the forest floor. Harry wiped grime from his forehead, his breath ragged after the run from the thorn sentinels that guarded the eastern edge of the hollow glade. Daphne limped beside him, her left ankle swollen where a vine had lashed out with surprising precision. She didn't complain, not once, but Harry saw the way her jaw clenched, the way her fingers trembled as she tore a strip from her cloak to bind the wound. "We can't keep running," she said, voice low. "They'll hunt us until the trials are complete, or we're dead." Harry crouched beside a crumbling standing stone, its surface etched with runes that shimmered faintly in the dim light. "They don't want us to survive, not really. The wild court sees us as proof of wizarding arrogance. 2 children of Hogwarts, symbols of everything they think we've broken." Daphne exhaled sharply. "And yet they gave us a chance. 3 trials. Why? Because they're bound by their own laws," came a voice, dry as autumn leaves. From the shadows between two moss-laden oaks stepped a figure cloaked in bark and twilight. His eyes glowed amber, pupils slit like a cat's. A dryad elder, one of the few who still spoke to mortals. The accords are not so easily discarded, even in anger. Harry gripped his wand, but Daphne placed a hand on his arm. Wait. The trials were never meant to be survived alone. The dryad continued, stepping forward. They were designed for balance, wizard and creature, mind and magic, power and restraint. Harry frowned. You're saying we're supposed to work together? The dryad tilted his head. You already are, but not as equals. One leads, the other follows. One trusts, the other calculates. That will not suffice in the final trial. Not with the veil stirring beneath the roots. Daphne's breath caught. The veil? A prison, the dryad said. Older than your ministry, older than Hogwarts. It holds what the first wizards and fae bound together when the world was young, but the bindings are fraying. Because you have forgotten the accords. Because magic is unbalanced. Harry looked at Daphne. Her eyes, usually guarded, were wide with something like fear, genuine, unguarded. Not for herself, for what might come. If the veil breaks, she whispered, what escapes? Not what, the dryad said. Who, the Hollow King? The one who refused balance, who sought to rule both worlds as one, and was torn in two for it. One half bound here, the other cast into the void. And now it seeks to return. Silence settled like frost. We don't stand a chance alone, Harry finally said. No, the dryad agreed. But together, wizard and witch, yes, but more, wizard and the wild. You might. The second trial lies in the ruin of whispers. There, the old magic still sings, but it will not answer a single voice. It demands harmony. Daphne looked at Harry, then extended her hand, not in formality, in alliance. We've been treating this like a competition, she said. But it's not. It's a test of unity. Harry took her hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was firm. If we fail, he said, it's not just us who pay. No, she said softly, it's everyone. The wind stirred, carrying the faint sound of distant chimes, metallic yet alive. The path ahead split into two, one lined with bones, the other with blooming nightshade. The dryad pointed not with hand, but with his gaze. Choose not as wizards. Choose as the forest would. Harry and Daphne exchanged a glance, no words, just understanding. They stepped forward together. The air grew thick and cold as they stepped through the crumbling archway, the moss-covered stones swallowing the last echoes of their footsteps. Before them a spiral staircase, half collapsed and slick with damp, wound down into a darkness that seemed to breathe. Harry's fingers tightened around his wand, its tip sputtering a weak blue light that barely pushed back the shadows. Daphne walked beside him, silent and poised, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of a silver dagger she'd taken from a statue's grasp in the antechamber. She hadn't spoken since the ravens had warned them. Star. 3 trials passed, 1 threshold, 1 mistake, and the world above will forget your names. Star. It's not natural, she murmured, her breath, a pale wisp in the chill. The air feels chewed. Harry glanced at her. Her usually composed face was taut, eyes narrowed on the steps below. You can feel it too? Every hair on my neck is standing. This isn't just magic, it's memory. Dang. They descended slowly, each stone step groaning under their weight. The walls, once carved with spiraling runes, now pulsed faintly, like veins beneath skin. Harry reached out, brushing a glyph with his fingertips. A jolt shot up his arm, images flashed behind his eyes, a forest burning, voices screaming in a language he didn't know, but understood all the same. Star betrayal, oathbreaker, blood price, star. He snatched his hand back. That wasn't just a rune, it's alive. Daphne's voice was calm, but low. They said the 3rd trial was beneath the roots, that the spirit remembers what we've forgotten, what the founders buried. And no one's come back from this one. No, she said. But no one's had a Potter and a Greengrass together either. Our bloodlines both touch the old coven. Maybe that's why they chose us. Or why they want us dead. Harry exhaled, watching his breath curl into the dark. You really believe that? That we're here to atone? I believe, she said, stepping past him, that if we don't finish this, something worse than the wild court will rise. Listen. A sound rose from below, rhythmic like stone grinding against bone. Then, a whisper. Not in words, but in star intent. Star. Hunger, grief, rage. The staircase ended in a circular chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. At its center stood a dais of black basalt, cracked down the middle. From the fissure, a sickly green mist crawled across the floor, coiling like serpents. Suspended above the stone, chained in threads of light that hummed with ancient magic, was a figure, tall, emaciated, its limbs too long, its face a shifting blur of sorrow and fury. It didn't move, but its eyes, when they opened, were twin pools of stormlit water. Daphne drew the dagger. This is the Vowkeeper, the one they bound when the first wand was raised against the Fae, and now it's waking up. The chains trembled. A voice, layered and broken, filled the chamber. You carry their blood, their lies, their wands. Star Harry stepped forward, heart hammering. We didn't make the oath. We didn't break it. Star, but you live in its shadow. You breathe because others bled. The balance is undone. A life for a life. A vow for a vow. Star, Daphne's voice cut through the gloom. Steady. Then let us renew it. Not with blood, with choice. Silence. The mist stilled. The spirit's head turned slowly toward her. Star, you would speak for the forgotten, you, child of silver doors, and silent halls? Star, I would, she said. If it means the forest doesn't burn again. Harry looked at her, truly looked, her jaw set, her eyes bright with something fiercer than fear. Pride? Awe? He wasn't sure, but he stepped beside her, shoulder to shoulder. We'll do the trial, he said. Whatever it is. The chains snapped, not with a crash, but with a sigh, like a long-held breath released. The spirit floated down, its form solidifying. A woman once. Her robes were of living bark, her hair woven from ivy and ash. Star, then answer this. Star, she whispered. Star, what do you offer the earth when you have taken everything? Star, the ground trembled. From the cracks, roots began to rise, twisting, questing. Daphne gripped his arm. Not a test of power, she breathed. A test of truth. Harry closed his eyes and spoke. I offer guilt. I offer memory. I offer regret. Daphne didn't hesitate. And I offer silence, the silence of those who never spoke. I offer their names. The roots stilled, the mist curled back, and from the dais, a single white flower bloomed, petals like starlight, stem of silver thorn. The spirit smiled, then faded, like mist at dawn. The air in the root tunnels was thick with the scent of damp earth and something older, moss-choked stone, humming with buried power. Harry's wand cast a narrow beam of light that flickered across the gnarled walls, where roots as thick as tree trunks twisted like sleeping serpents. They pulsed faintly, veins of emerald light threading through their bark. Daphne walked ahead, her silken robe snagging on the rough stone, but she didn't complain. Her wand was out, fingers steady, eyes scanning the shifting shadows. We're being followed, she whispered. Harry didn't ask how she knew. He felt it too. A pressure in the air, like the breath before thunder. The trial had promised danger, but this felt different. Not part of the game, something had woken. A low groan echoed through the cavern, and the roots shivered. Then the earth cracked. From the fissure surged a creature of bark and thorn, its body woven from the forest's oldest veins. 6 limbs, each tipped with jagged points, dragged it forward on spider-like grace. Its face, if it could be called that, was a hollow mask of petrified wood, glowing with the same green fire that threaded the roots. It let out a sound like wind through dead leaves, and more fissures split the ground. They're guardians, Daphne said sharply, but they're not supposed to be active. The trials are meant to test, not destroy. Maybe someone changed the rules, Harry muttered, stepping back as the first creature lunged. He slashed his wand. Star, Expelliarmus Star. The spell bounced off the creature's hide like rain on stone. It didn't flinch. Daphne flicked her wrist. Star, Incendio, Star, and flames erupted around its leg. The wood blackened, cracked, but the thing advanced, the fire snuffing out as if swallowed. "They're bound to the roots," she breathed. "Hurt the roots, hurt the beast." Harry didn't wait. He spun, shouting "Star! Diffindo! Star!" at the nearest cluster of glowing roots. The air screamed as the vines split, spilling emerald light like blood. The creature shrieked, one limb withering to ash. But more rose from the fractures, their hollow eyes fixed on the intruders. They fought back to back then, a rhythm forming between them. Harry's spells were forceful, direct, blasts of air, cutting hexes, anything to keep the creatures at bay. Daphne was precise, elegant, weaving charms that withered bark and dried sap like ancient curses. She murmured in a language Harry didn't know, and the stone beneath their feet shimmered with silver runes. "You know Sylvan?" he panted, dodging a whip-like root. "My grandmother did," Daphne replied, flicking her wand in a spiral. Star obstro, star, a wall of thorns erupted between them and the horde. Said it would save my life one day. It just might. The wall held for only seconds before the creatures tore through, their limbs splintering wood and stone. One lunged at Daphne. Harry tackled her aside, the thorn point grazing his shoulder, drawing a line of fire across his skin. He rolled. "Cast Star, Stupefy Star." The red bolt struck the creature's face. It recoiled, but didn't fall. "They don't feel pain like we do," Daphne said, pulling him up. "They feel the forest, the damage. We have to get to the heart. The heart? The central root. If it's corrupted, it's turning the guardians feral. We stop it there, or we don't stop at all." Another tremor. The ceiling cracked, and roots plunged down like spears. Harry shielded Daphne with his body, feeling the impact shudder through his bones. Blood trickled down his temple. He tasted iron. "We go together," he said. She looked at him, really looked. And for the first time there was no mask. Just fear and resolve. Together, they ran, dodging roots and snapping jaws, toward the pulse of light deeper in the tunnel. Behind them the forest roared, alive and angry. Then beneath it all, something deeper still began to stir. A breath, slow and ancient, rising from the dark. The air smelled of damp earth and burnt ozone, thick with the residue of broken spells. Harry lay on his side, one arm twisted beneath him, the other outstretched toward Daphne, as if he'd tried to reach her, even in collapse. Blood, dark and slow, seeped from a gash along his temple and pooled in the hollow of his collarbone. His breath came in shallow, uneven gasps, each one a struggle against the weight of the cursed vines that had wrapped around his chest, like serpents with iron bones. Daphne knelt beside him, her fingers trembling as she brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. She hadn't meant to scream when he'd thrown himself in front of her. She hadn't meant to feel her heart stop with a thorned whip of living ivy had lashed out from the crumbling altar. But he had moved faster than thought, faster than instinct, and taken the blow meant for her. "You idiot," she whispered, voice cracking. "You absolute fool." He blinked up at her, dazed, but managed a weak grin. "Told you I wasn't letting anything happen to you," she choked back a sob. "Why, we weren't even speaking this morning. You barely trust me, and still—" "Doesn't matter," he murmured. "You're here. That's enough." She pressed her palm against the wound on his chest, trying to slow the bleeding. The vines had been enchanted, older magic, the kind that poisoned the blood. She could feel the heat radiating from his skin, unnatural, and spreading. The third trial was supposed to test their bond, not end it. The chamber around them groaned, ancient stones shifting as the forest above trembled. Roots cracked through the ceiling like blackened fingers, coiling around broken columns. The trial wasn't over. The wild court demanded proof, not of strength, but of sacrifice, and Harry had just given it. Daphne looked down at him, really looked, and saw not the boy who lived, not the reckless Gryffindor, but Harry, the boy who had shared his last chocolate frog on the train, who had argued with her about pure-blood nonsense with fire in his eyes, who had stayed awake with her during their first night in the forest, whispering stories to keep the silence from swallowing them whole. She wiped her cheek and found it wet. "I don't care about your family name," she said, voice low and fierce. "I don't care about bloodlines or alliances. You stubborn, self-sacrificing prat. You don't get to die here, not after everything." He tried to speak, but coughed instead, a trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth. Daphne tore a strip from her cloak and pressed it harder against his wound. "Listen to me. You don't get to leave. Not now, not when I've just realized." She stopped, took a breath. "I need you, Harry." The words hung between them, fragile as morning mist. She had never said them, never allowed herself to think them clearly. But they were true. And in this broken place, beneath the roots of the world, truth was the only magic that mattered. His fingers twitched, then found hers, cold, but holding on. "You always did," he whispered. Above them, the stones began to glow. Soft at first, then brighter, pulsing with a golden light that climbed the walls like vines of fire. The vines binding Harry shriveled and turned to ash. The air cleared. The trial had been passed, not by wand or spell, but by something older. Daphne lowered her forehead to his, tears slipping between them. "Don't you dare do that again." He laughed, weak but real, no promises. And for the first time she smiled through the fear, the grief, the uncertainty, because he was alive, because he was hers, and because against all odds they had found something worth protecting. The air in the Chamber of Whispers hummed with a low, resonant frequency that made Harry's molars ache. Around them, the walls pulsed faintly, veins of luminescent moss threading through ancient stone-like living circuitry. Daphne stood at his side, her breath shallow, wand clutched so tightly, her knuckles had gone white. The third trial had begun not with thunder or flame, but with silence. A silence so complete it pressed against the eardrums, as if the world were holding its breath. "We're being tested," Daphne murmured, not looking at him. "Not our strength, our connection," Harry frowned. "Connection? To what?" "To each other." Her voice was steady, but he heard the tremor beneath it. "The Wild Court doesn't care about dueling mastery or spellbooks. They care about balance, harmony, magic that remembers how to breathe." A soft chime rang through the chamber, and the moss flared blue. From the floor, tendrils of silver light rose like vines, coiling toward them. Harry instinctively raised his wand. Star, Protego, star. But the shield chong flickered and died, absorbed into the light, as if it were nothing. "Don't fight it," Daphne said sharply. "That's what they want. Control, power. But this magic, it doesn't respond to commands. It responds to intent." He lowered his wand, heart hammering. "So what do we do?" She turned to him then, her eyes pale green in the shifting glow. "We stop being enemies. We stop pretending we don't need each other. And we trust." "Trust." Harry let out a short laugh. "You've barely spoken to me outside of insults for 6 years. And yet here we are." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Bound by trial, by fate, by something older than either of us. Isn't that enough of a reason?" Another chime. The silver vines thickened, forming arches that spiraled toward the ceiling. From them dripped droplets of light that hovered in midair, each one reflecting fragments of memory. Harry on the train, first year, Ron beside him. Daphne alone in the Slytherin common room, tracing runes in the dust of an old book. "This is our past," she whispered, "but it's not our truth now." The droplets began to swirl, forming a sphere between them. It pulsed like a heartbeat. "It wants us to touch it," Harry said. "Together." They reached out. Their fingers didn't brush by accident. They met deliberately, palms aligning, wands still in hand but forgotten. The moment skin met skin, the sphere exploded into light, not blinding, but warm, like dawn breaking over the lake. And then, magic. Not the sharp crack of a spell, nor the surge of a curse. This was softer, deeper, a current flowing between them, not from wands, but from chest to chest, breath to breathe. Harry felt it first as warmth in his sternum, then a quiet hum in his bones. He saw, no, star felt star. Daphne's thoughts, not as words, but as colors. Emerald resolve, silver caution, a flicker of gold, hope. Her magic had always been precise, controlled, elegant. His was raw, instinctive, fiery, but now they wove together, not merging, but star dancing star. The silver vines responded, bending, retreating, then blooming into flowers of pure light that scattered like fireflies. "You see?" Daphne breathed. It's not about who's stronger. It's about who's willing to listen. The chamber trembled, the moss dimmed. A voice, neither male nor female, echoed from the stones. Star, the bond is forged, the trial is past. They pulled their hands apart slowly, reluctantly. The light faded, but the warmth remained. In the air, in their skin, in the quiet space between their heartbeats. Harry looked at her, really looked. The girl who had once seemed carved from ice now stood with her guard down, eyes wide, chest rising and falling with something like wonder. "We did it," he said. "We began," she corrected, and something answered. Outside, deep beneath the roots of the forbidden forest, the earth shifted. A breath, long held, was finally exhaled. And in the silence that followed, something ancient and hungry began to dream. The air in the glade shimmered like water over stone, thick with the residue of old magic and the faint, sweet scent of crushed moon petals. Where the spirit had raged mere moments ago, a writhing tempest of stolen memories and shattered oaths, now hum only silence, its essence, bound in a lattice of silver thread, spun from Daphne's whispered incantation, and Harry's stubborn will pulsed once, dimly, before sinking into the earth like a dying star. The roots of the ancient rowan at the glade's center trembled, then stilled, drinking deep. Harry exhaled, his breath ragged, shoulders slumping. His wand arm trembled, still half raised, streaked with soot and something darker, sap that wasn't sap. He looked at Daphne. She stood straight, pale but composed, her fingers curled loosely at her sides. A single thread of silver still clung to her wrist, fading like mist in morning light. "It's done," she said, voice quiet but clear, echoing slightly in the hollow left by the spirit's absence. From the stone arches that ringed the clearing, the members of the wild court emerged, slowly at first, then in a flowing tide of bark and feather, antler and shadow. The dryad with willow hair stepped forward, her eyes no longer cold, but softened, like moss over stone. The stagman lowered his great head, breath steaming in the cooling air. "The oaths are mended," he intoned, his voice like wind through high branches. "Not by blood, nor by force, but by choice. You faced the fracture and chose to heal it." Harry swallowed. "We didn't do it alone." "No," said the dryad. "You listened, you remembered what wizards have long forgotten, that magic is not a tool, but a covenant." Daphne turned, scanning the faces of the Fae. "And now," said the stagman, "the court is whole. The spirit of betrayal, the wound left when your kind broke the first concord, has been sealed, not destroyed. Such things cannot be unmade, but it will sleep. And we awaken." He stepped forward, pressing a cloven hoof to the earth where the spirit had vanished. The ground shimmered, and from the soil rose a sapling, pale silver bark, leaves edged in gold. It grew rapidly, unfurling into a young tree that hummed with quiet power. "This is the new oath," he said. "A living bond, not a chain, but a promise. And it begins with you." Harry frowned. "Us?" "The trials were not merely to test your worth," the dryad murmured. "They were to awaken the bridge, you, Harry Potter, who bears the scar of violence, but seeks peace. And you, Daphne Greengrass, who carries the weight of bloodline in silence, yet speaks truth. You are the first in centuries to walk both worlds, and not seek to dominate either." A hush fell. Somewhere deep in the forest, a single bird sang, a clear, pure note that seemed to ripple through the trees. Daphne looked at Harry, her eyes searching. He met her gaze, and for the first time, there was no hesitation, no calculation, only understanding. They had argued in the ruins of the sunken temple, nearly come to blows in the whispering caves. They had shared bread beneath a sky of floating runes, and stood back to back against shadow wolves, with eyes like dying embers. And now, in this quiet glade, something unspoken settled between them, lighter than trust, warmer than alliance. "We accept," Harry said, before he even knew the words were coming. The stagman bowed his head. "Then go, the forest remembers. The world beyond these trees, yours and ours, still trembles on the edge of forgetting. But now there is a thread between, guard it." As they turned to leave, Daphne paused, glancing back. What about the darkness beneath the trees? The thing that stirred when the spirit wailed. The Fae exchanged glances. The Dryad's expression darkened. That is older, deeper. It was not born of betrayal, but of hunger. And it has tasted the rift. Harry's hand tightened on his wand. It's waking. Yes, said the Stagman, and when it rises, it will not care for oaths or courts. It will consume. Daphne's voice was steady. Then we'll be ready. They walked back through the forest in silence, the silver saplings' light fading behind them. The trees seemed taller now, watching. The wind carried voices too soft to understand. But for the first time in centuries, the wild court stood united, and in the quiet between two unlikely allies, a new kind of magic had taken root. Dawn bled across the treetops in thin, golden fingers, catching in the mist that curled like smoke from the damp earth. The edge of the forbidden forest stood silent, as if holding its breath, and from within its shadowed depths, two figures stumbled forward. Limping, weary, their cloaks torn and smeared with earth, and something darker, something that shimmered faintly under the rising light. Harry's breath came in ragged bursts. His glasses were cracked, one lens fogged with the residue of ancient spells, but he kept moving, one hand clutching Daphne's arm to steady her. As much as himself, her face was pale, etched with exhaustion, yet her eyes, sharp and green as new leaves, refused to close, scanning the open stretch between the trees and the distant silhouette of Hogwarts. "We made it," he said, voice hoarse. Speaking the words would make them real. Daphne exhaled through her nose, a sound halfway between disbelief and bitter relief. "We survived." "That's not the same thing." A cold wind slipped between them, carrying the scent of pine and damp stone. Somewhere deep behind them, beneath roots older than the castle, the wild court was stirring. The third trial had ended not in victory, but in escape, something the ancient Fae would not soon forget. Harry turned back once. The forest loomed, its canopy thick and impenetrable, shadows pooling beneath like ink in water. He thought he saw movement, a flicker of silver eyes between the trunks, a whisper of antlered silhouettes. But when he blinked, there was nothing. "They're watching," he murmured. "Of course they are," Daphne said. "They let us go. That's more dangerous than if they tried to kill us." Before Harry could answer, a voice cracked through the stillness. "Merlin's beard. Harry?" They both froze. From the cover of the whomping willow's outer branches, three figures emerged. Ron, Hermione, and Neville, wands drawn, faces pale with shock. Ron's was the one who'd spoken, his freckles stark against his ashen skin. Hermione's hand flew to her mouth. "You're alive," she whispered. "We thought, after the storm, after the centaurs said they saw the ground split open. We thought you were dead," Neville finished, stepping forward, his voice thick. Harry managed a weak smile. "We were close." Hermione rushed forward, wrapping Harry in a fierce embrace, before turning to Daphne with hesitation. Daphne stepped back instinctively, arms crossing, but Hermione didn't falter. She reached out, gripped Daphne's shoulder. "You too. You're both back. That's what matters." Daphne looked away, jaw tight. "Don't thank me yet. We brought something back with us." Ron frowned. "What do you mean?" Harry rubbed a hand over his face. "The trials. They weren't just tests. They were a warning. The Wild Court believes the wizards broke their oaths, centuries ago. Blood oaths. And they're not the only ones angry." Neville's eyes darkened. "The centaurs have been restless. Divinations in the stars, all about roots cracking, and the sleep beneath the earth ending." Daphne nodded. "Something's waking, something old, older than the founders. And the court, they didn't stop us because we passed. They stopped us because they want us to deliver a message." Hermione's breath caught. "What message?" "That the debt comes due," Daphne said softly. "And if the wizarding world doesn't answer it, the forest won't stay forbidden for long." A silence fell, broken only by the distant cry of a magpie. Then Ron exhaled, long and slow. "Well, that's not terrifying at all." Harry finally laughed, short, raw, but real. He looked at Daphne, really looked at her. Her tangled hair, the dirt on her cheek, the quiet strength in her stance. And something unspoken passed between them. They weren't friends, not yet, but they were no longer enemies. And for now, that was enough. The first thing Harry noticed when he stepped back through the veil was how loud the world had become. Birds chirped with jarring clarity, the wind rustled the leaves like brittle parchment, and the distant hoot of an owl made him flinch. He stood barefoot on damp grass, the chill seeping into his soles, his breath visible in the early morning fog. Beside him, Daphne shuddered, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her usually immaculate hair tangled with vine fragments and glittering traces of silver moss that hadn't been there before. They were back, the edge of the forbidden forest, just past Hagrid's hut. Smoke curled from the chimney in thin, steady lines. Everything looked ordinary. Too ordinary. "It's smaller," Daphne murmured, her voice hoarse as if she hadn't spoken in weeks. "The trees, the sky, it all feels flat." Harry nodded slowly. The world seemed drained of depth, as though someone had peeled away a layer of reality and left behind a painted stage. He flexed his fingers, half expecting to feel the hum of ancient runes beneath his skin, the whisper of the wild court's magic still clinging to his bones. But there was nothing. Just the ache in his muscles and the lingering taste of moonflower tea on his tongue, bitter, metallic, alive. A twig snapped behind them. They both turned sharply, wands drawn before they even registered the motion. Hagrid stood a few feet away, lantern in hand, his beetle-black eyes wide. "Blimey," he said, lowering the light. "Yeah, look like ghosts." "We're alive," Harry said, holstering his wand with stiff fingers. "That's something." Hagrid stepped closer, sniffing the air. "Harry smell like old stone. And lightning. What in Merlin's name were ye? Doing out here?" Daphne exchanged a glance with Harry. The truth sat like a stone in his throat. How could they explain the trials, the singing stones, the river that flowed uphill, the mirror that showed not their faces but their fears? How could they speak of the Hollow King, who judged them with eyes like dying stars, or the way the forest itself had breathed around them, watching, waiting? "We were lost," Daphne said at last, her voice steady. "Just lost." Hagrid didn't look convinced, but he nodded, offering his coat. "Yeah, need rest. Both of ye." "Yea, look like death, warned over." Inside the castle, the torches burned too bright. The chatter in the great hall was a cacophony. Laughter, clattering plates, the scrape of benches. Harry sat with Ron and Hermione, but their words blurred into noise. He watched the steam rise from his porridge, and for a moment it twisted into the shape of antlers, curling like the crown of the Wild Queen. "You're not eating," Hermione said, frowning. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I keep expecting, I don't know what, for the floor to shift, for the walls to speak." She reached across the table, touching his hand. "You've been through something. Maybe you should see Madame Pomfrey." He pulled his hand back gently. "She can't fix this." Daphne sat at the Slytherin table, alone as always, but Harry saw the way her fingers traced the edge of her goblet, as if testing its solidity. When she looked up, their eyes met across the hall. No words, just understanding. That night, Harry stood at the window of the Gryffindor tower, staring into the dark line of the forest. The moon hung low, full, and silver, and for a heartbeat he thought he saw movement among the trees. Shapes, without names, shadows that moved against the wind. And then, faint but unmistakable, a melody rose from the depths, a song with no words, some in a voice older than language. He pressed his palm to the cold glass. They weren't free. They were on loan. The air beneath the ancient oaks was thick with the scent of damp moss and crushed moon petals, the canopy above filtering the twilight into shifting patterns of silver and shadow. Harry stood at the edge of the crystal-clear pool where they'd first argued, where Daphne had accused him of recklessness, and he'd fired back that she cared more for protocol than survival. Now he watched her reflection ripple in the water as she stepped softly from between the trees, her dark green cloak catching the last light like leaves after rain. She didn't look surprised to see him. "You're early," she said, her voice quiet, almost reverent in the hush of the forest. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted, hands slipping into the pockets of his worn trousers. "Kept thinking about what you said, about the third trial, the way the runes shifted when we touched them together." Daphne moved closer, her boots silent on the moss. "It wasn't just magic, it was alignment. Like two halves of a spell finally finding resonance." He turned to face her fully. "Do you think that's why they paired us? Not because we're strong, but because we fit." She hesitated, then gave a small, thoughtful nod. The Wild Court doesn't deal in accidents. They see threads, patterns in fate. Maybe they saw this, long before we did. A breeze stirred the surface of the pool, carrying the faint chime of distant wind through stone. A sound they'd learned meant the forest was listening. Harry exhaled slowly, watching the ripples spread. "I used to think this was all about survival," he said. "Get through the trials, save ourselves, go back to the world like nothing happened. But it's not like that, is it?" "No," she whispered. "It hasn't been for a while." He reached out, almost without thinking, and brushed a stray strand of hair from her temple. Her breath caught, just slightly, but she didn't pull away. Her eyes, gray as stormlight, held his with a quiet intensity that made his chest ache. "I don't want to go back the same," he said. "Not if it means pretending this didn't change me." Daphne stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her, smell the faint trace of lavender and old parchment that always clung to her. "You're not the boy who stormed into the Wild Court demanding answers, and I'm not the girl who believed rules could keep us safe. No," he said softly. "We're something else now." She lifted a hand, tentative, and placed it over his heart. "It beats differently when you're near. Not faster, clearer, like it finally knows the rhythm it was meant to follow." Harry covered her hand with his own, lacing their fingers together. "I didn't choose this, but I'm glad it's you." A faint smile touched her lips, not the sharp-guarded thing she used to wear, but something real, something soft. "I would have denied it a month ago, said it was distraction. Weakness, but now I think it's the only strength that matters." Above them, the first stars began to pierce the twilight, their light catching in the mist rising from the pool. Somewhere deep in the forest, a single flute-like note echoed, ancient, melancholy, and strangely approving. They stood there, hands clasped, breaths mingling in the cooling air, not as captives, not as rivals, not even as allies bound by duty, but as two souls who had walked through fire and chosen to return, not because they had to, but because they wanted to, together. The air beneath the canopy hummed, thick with the scent of damp earth, and something older, moss-laced stone, sleeping roots, and the quiet pulse of magic reborn. Sunlight, fractured by 1,000 leaves, spilled in gold-green shards across the forest floor, catching in the threads of Daphne's cloak as she knelt beside a shallow spring. Her fingers brushed the water's surface, sending ripples through the reflection of the sky, a sky that no longer bled red at dusk, nor crackled with unseen wrath. Harry stood a few paces behind, silent, watching. The weight of the last trial still clung to his bones, a dull ache beneath the skin. He remembered the cavern beneath the roots of the elder weirwood, the voice of the Wild Court echoing through stone, asking not for power, but for sacrifice. Not his life, not even his magic, but his silence, his refusal to act, the moment he'd chosen to listen instead of strike. He hadn't expected to win. Daphne lifted her hand from the spring, water beating on her fingertips like liquid crystal. "It's different," she said, voice soft, almost reverent. "The forest, it knows." He stepped forward, boots pressing into soft loam. "Knows what? That the old debt is paid." She turned to look at him, her pale eyes catching the light in a way that made them seem almost silver. "They were never just testing our strength, were they? They were testing whether we could see them, not as monsters, not as beasts, but as keepers." Harry exhaled, long and slow. "I thought they were going to kill us." "They wanted to," she said simply. "But we gave them something better, we gave them proof." A breeze stirred the leaves above, carrying with it the distant call of a bird that hadn't been heard in centuries. The dryads had returned to the glades. The river spirits sang again in the hidden streams. The Wild Court had not spoken to the wizarding world in 800 years. Now they had accepted two champions, one chosen by flame, the other by frost. Daphne rose, brushing dirt from her knees. "They'll send word to the ministry, not through owls, through roots, through dreams." "Do you think they'll listen?" She gave a small, knowing smile. "Not at first, but they'll feel it. The wards at Hogwarts are already changing. The forbidden line, the one carved into the earth around the school, it's fading." Harry looked down at his hands, callous now, marked with faint silver lines where bramble thorns had drawn blood during the trial of thorns. "I used to think the forest was dangerous because it was wild. Now I think it was dangerous because we forgot how to listen. Daphne stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint freckles across her nose, the way her breath fogged slightly in the cool air. "You're not what I expected, Potter." He met her gaze. "Neither are you." A silence settled between them, not awkward, but full, like the pause before a spell takes root. Then, from deep in the wood, a low chime rang out, not a bell, but the sound of a stone struck by root, a signal older than language. The final seal had been broken. The pact renewed. Harry felt it in his chest, a warmth spreading outward, as if something buried inside him had finally unfurled. Daphne reached out, her fingers brushing his wrist. "It's not over. Whatever sleeps beneath, it stirred when we passed the last trial." He nodded. "But it's not awake, not yet. And when it is?" He looked toward the dark heart of the forest, where shadows pooled like ink. "Then we go back in." She didn't flinch, didn't look away. "Together?" she asked. He turned his hand, lacing his fingers with hers. "Warm, sure, unafraid, always."